All righty, I will go ahead and call this meeting of the Dunn County Executive Committee to order. Call the roll. I believe we are all here with John Calabrese joining us online. Approval of the minutes.
I move approval.
Second.
Supervisor Morehouse moves, Supervisor Steen seconds. Any discussion on the minutes?
Chair McCullough,
Yes.
I just noticed that on item 6C, under the Judiciary and Law Committee, it says the Dunn County access or safety answering pint, and that's kind of funny, but I think it should be point.
Good point. So with that correction, anybody else? Okay, all in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Public comments. I believe we had one. Yeah, come on up.
Thank you, Dan. My name is Larry Bjork. I reside at E7643 430th Avenue, Menominee, in the town of Springbrook. And I'm here to address the board, the executive committee, on trying to hold the line on county expenses. I can speak to a few things that I know, and when I say holding the line, I'm saying that so many of our residents have costs that they cannot control, and they can't control property taxes either. And I just give you an example of a supply and demand issue that I'm right in the middle of, and that's the price of beef. And you go to the grocery store, I'm told now that there are cuts of meat that are $18 to $20 a pound or greater. And when I hear that, or something like that, or the cost of blacktops going up, it always goes, my question is, why did that happen? Not, isn't that something how high it is, but why did it happen? Well, if you think of the market and supply and demand, beef that goes to the grocery store starts out at baby calves on farms like mine. And the number of baby calves that are produced that go to feedlots and then to slaughter is a supply, and the demand stays fairly constant, even at high prices. So why do we have high prices for beef? Well, it goes to nature basically almost creating a second Dust Bowl from the 30s in Nebraska, Oklahoma, and Kansas. And cow numbers, mother cows that produce those calves that end up in your grocery store are short of supply coming to market. Those cows have been culled because farmers don't have feed to feed them. And it's the lowest inventory million ahead in 2019. It was 31 million. And in 23, it's down another to where they're down to 28 million, and it's continued to drop until 26 and start rebounding after that. So let me give you an example of what that means in dollars and cents to a farmer. Little baby calves that come off of Angus cows at maybe 2 or 3 months traditionally have a value of $200 to $300 at the most, and then somebody takes them and raises them up. Baby calves are now selling across the state of Wisconsin at over $600 a head. And it's not that difficult to raise a calf, but the mortality rate is probably higher on calves than anything else, especially moving around and commingling and everything like that. Yearling heifers that were born last year, I just sold one. To me, she was worth $1,000. Market paid me $1,560. She was a 900 pounds at $1.76 a pound. So that tells you that farmers or investors or whoever are buying up females to breed, produce calves, and get those calves to the market. And then you'll see a rebound of prices coming back up as the supply comes up. That's a supply and demand. Drought causes drop in the supply, demand is there, price is there. What I can't really get my head around is when government, and I'm talking federal government, seems to be doing everything in their power to limit fuel and gas production. You know, it's kind of simplistic, but think of a field of oil wells as being that herd of mama cows. When those wells do not produce fuel, there's less fuel available, prices go up. Diesel fuel historically forever and ever has been $1 a gallon under gasoline. In the last few years, through whatever reason, probably one, not to see any black smoke, is that diesel price is $1 a gallon more. So on my farm, for example, I can't tell you exactly how much I use, but it's a tremendous cost. And to think that that cost might be driven by, you know, somebody's political view really bothers me. Okay, last thing. Here's a map and of the 340 line that they're rebuilding in the town of Springbrook all across Wisconsin to take in the power from the solar panels in town of Springbrook. So I've got 3 structures on my farm that were wood structures, big, tall H things holding 3 lines. And they're coming down and they're putting up steel structures. And then a mile from my farm will be the facility that takes the solar panel energy and puts it up into the 340 line, and away it goes down the road. And I only mentioned that because, you know, we were all real excited to receiving some money from the solar people per year, and that we inked it down at 35 years. My grandfather in August 29th of 1960 signed a contract, and to go across a 40, they paid him $450. Well, you might ask people in land what land is, and that's for continuous use, continuous rerouting, rebuilding, whatever they want. So we're taking advantage of, I think, at certain times. Now, I didn't bring this to show that it's some type of space thing to help Randy get alert from this pound of red cedar here. This is a spring that comes off an H&S wheel rake. So I needed to buy one of these as I come to town today. So I thought I would stop before here, and then I'd come to the county committee and say, hey, look at this. I bought the last one in 6/15/21, and it cost me $20.35. So I went in there today to buy 2 more. And I was going to say, see how prices have just gotten out of control. Well, today, the same spring that cost me $20.35, today cost me $19.62. So, so whatever they're doing to hold the line, I appreciate it. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Supervisor Bjork. Do we have any other public comment? That looks like a no. County Managers Report. Chris, over to you.
Look at that, huh? Look at him go. All right.
That's pretty high tech.
It's very high tech. It's right up there with turn it off and on 15 times and it'll get better. Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. Draft county board agenda for next week. Usual things, purchase orders over $40,000. We'll do a review of where we're at with regard to budget development. And then we will have an audit report from our new audit firm Kerber Rose, who are just finishing up this week. I need to verify whether or not, before I send the agenda out tomorrow, whether or not West Central Wisconsin Regional Planning is coming to do their annual report. They actually haven't been here for a couple of years and they've had a change of leadership. So I'm not sure exactly if they're coming or not, but I will double check on that. We have department reports from Corporation Council, facilities, and the treasurer. And then we have some budget adjustments, second reading of the potential ordinance, code of ordinances amendment, creating a fiscal policy, a fund balance policy, then a zoning change, and ordinance amendment on the comprehensive zoning ordinance, unlimited commercial districts, second reading, and a first reading on the creation of a broadband task force as a special committee of the county. And then finally, a first reading on an ordinance change regulating hours and use of county parks. So a full, but perhaps not overwhelming agenda. Anything else? Any questions about that or things that I've missed or should be added? All
Doesn't
right,
look like it.
okay. So,
Chair McCullough, if I may.
Yes, Supervisor Calabrese.
County Manager. Thank you. I imagine there will be something for Supervisor Rogers in the memorial section.
Yep, we've got a plaque and
Okay, I just didn't see it specified, so I didn't know if that needed to be on the agenda or what, but thank you.
thank you for checking.
all right, next, we'll spend the remainder of our time kind of working, the remainder of my time or my report, working through some budget information, again, giving you some additional information and tools as we begin to work through coming up with a balanced budget over the next month. So after some edits and changes, so from here on out, the numbers change. I don't know that they change daily, but they change on a very, very regular basis as revenues are updated, changes and cuts are made or numbers are tweaked. Beata has been being very diligent about tracking staff changes. So if someone leaves, and then we hire new and that gap and figuring out what the change of salaries and all those things are. So the budget, the long and the short of it is that the budget numbers change regularly, but we will ultimately have prior to your October meeting, like a kind of point in time where we're at, and then that's where we'll kind of go from there on out, unless there are recommended changes after that. When we presented to you at the budget workshop, if you recall this document that had a $6.7 million gap. That gap is now about $6.3 million. So that's headed in a better that's a good direction. So one of the things that I wanted to talk just a little bit about, because I did have an opportunity to meet with a number of board supervisors and then as well as just kind of hearing conversation. And so I wanted to have just a brief review of kind of roles. So this is how I explained it to several of you, and in a way that logically makes sense to me. So department heads have a role to advocate for their department and ask for what they believe that they need. That's their job in a sense, amongst other things. The county manager and the finance, the CFO of finance department have a role or a responsibility to translate that request into what the numbers actually mean to move on to the county board. And the county board has a responsibility to decide what of those requests are going to be funded and how. And so when I think that there's occasionally comment about, well, why is that department head asking for that? Or on the flip side, why didn't the county board say yes to that? Or why did they say yes to that? Those are just people, those are just entities working within their role. And I just think it's really helpful to move out of the oh, someone's over asking or someone's under approving or whatever, just to say everyone has a role in this process. And that's, kind of how it works out best. I think it creates a nice balance in all of that. So with that, I am going to step backwards, and I've asked, so if you recall at the I got a little bit out of order. If you recall at the county board workshop, we focused in on the 8 departments that actually had a substantive request that was not salary related and was not like operational. That was that was operational. That was some larger request that wasn't across the county. And so we've now pared that down and have asked the DHS director, the sheriff, the highway department, and Carmen from the neighbors to step in and just do a review of their ask, the why, and then have you an opportunity to ask any questions about that, because some of you raised questions to me that I wasn't sure of the answer to. I realized that in our proposed budget, the neighbors does not have an actual levy ask, but I thought that Carmen would be able to provide some information both about why that is, as well as some sort of information about our role in providing skilled nursing services in Dunn County. So with that, Paula is here. Paula Winter from the Department of Human Services. Do you want me to pass this out for you?
You're prepared to be on paper duty today.
Gotta find something good at.
Thank
Yes,
you.
I can actually probably do.
Paula, is that the same document that you sent me? Did you do edits after that? Okay. You can go ahead and then I'll just try to bring it up.
Sure. All right, thanks.
You're not on. Now you are.
I'm now on. Thank you for handing those out for me. And thank you for allowing me to speak about the Department of Human Services budget this afternoon. I wanted to share a little bit with you regarding the services and programs that the department covers. We have many programs, and many times it's hard to really get a handle of what those programs are, and how many that we actually provide, and the services that are offered to people, and how many people we actually touch the lives of within our county and the residents. So I put together this document, and it's not something that I'm going to read to you, right? You can all read, but so that you have a really good understanding of the types of programs and services that we offer underneath each of the areas. And the way the budget is laid out, these are the topics in the budget as far as what they are. At the front of it, you'll see that there's a support services section. And that program in human services is a little bit different than other departments, where we are able to take all the people that support our department and the costs, such as, our pens, our papers, all of those kinds of things that are kind of out for everybody. We take those costs and then we split them out each by program. And so then a portion of those costs can then be paid for by the program. So for example, CCS is almost a fully reimbursed program. And so they also then help pay part of my salary, part of the deputy director's salary, part of the paper costs, all those kinds of things. So you can see there's an expense here, but in the end, that all gets dispersed then through each of the program based on how many staff are in that program. So there's a formula that Beata does with all of her magic numbers and comes up with this formula, and then that's dispersed, and we're able to then pay for some of that back. Same with some of the indirect that we're able to pay back to the county for, like Chris's position and those kinds of things. Some of our positions or our programs actually then bring money back into the other layers, treasurer, all of those kinds of things. So on the support staff services areas there, and then we also have behavioral health services. So as you can see, that's probably one of the programs that has the most programs or services in that area. I did put in here the most used services. There may be some smaller grants or things like that that we have that I didn't. You would have had lots and lots of pages in front of you, and I didn't add, some of those smaller grants, but these are the priority ones that we provide. And as you look there, you'll see the expense, for example, in behavioral health for all of these services that are listed there. We have $6 million in expenses for those programs. The portion of our budget is 38.33% of budget for behavioral health services, and we receive 5.26 million in grants. The other portion of that is tax levy. So you'll see that even though our budget is, $16 million, very little bit of that is tax levy compared to all the money that we bring in through grants and other expenses. For example, we bill consumers. If they have insurance, we're billing health insurance. If they have an ability to pay, we do a financial assessment and ask them to pay and gather that. And then we also have our grants and other ways of bringing in money for those programs. So you'll see behavioral health services on the second page, family and children's services. That is, all of our child protection, our youth justice, truancy, runaway, working with law enforcement with kids that have had offenses in the community. We have a $3.7 million budget there. That one is not as fully paid for through grants as some of the other ones, like the behavioral health. So it's 1.8 that we bring in for revenues in that. This is a mandated program. We are mandated by the state to provide those services. Children's long-term support, that one's almost fully paid for through grants. What the state says is each county, you have a maintenance of effort that you have to pay no matter how many services, how much you pay out for services, you have to pay this maintenance of effort. So that's what you're seeing there, is that difference is what we're mandated in Dunn County. So if we serve one person or if we serve 350 people, children in that program, we still have the same amount we have to pay. And that has to come from tax levy. That's what they're asking us for in that match. Economic support services, which is like the food share, Medicare, helping people get the insurance they need or the right funding for nursing home care, elderly, blind, disability, childcare services. You'll see there that we actually bring in more revenue from that program than the expense. And the reason that is, then anything that's over in that, it goes to help pay for those support staff services that I was talking about earlier. That's where that money goes for. So that program actually, we help bring in money above the expenses. Birth to 3 program is another mandated program that we have for children with 25% delay in development. And the state says you will do this program. Anybody that meets that level will receive these services. And so that is one of the areas that the legislative committee has been for the last several years. My understanding is asking for additional dollars because it's really not sufficient for the work we do. But at this time, we spend 637,000 in that area and only receive 308,000 back. Again, that's mandatory. We have no choice to do that. And it's a good thing to do for kids with disabilities, right? And then we have our Aging and Disability Resource Center, and this is not only the information assistance, helping people into long-term care, all of those types of things. It's also our nutrition program, so our Meals on Wheels, congregate meals, those types of things. And so we have a $2 million budget there and receive 1.8 in revenue back in that area. There's tons and tons of little grants in that program. Reminds me a lot of public health, where there's you try to capture every little dollar you can to make that up, and you kind of keep crossing the T's and dotting the I's to be able to bring that revenue in. But in the end, we're able to get a majority of that program money back. So as you see, you know, with that total, again, 16 million is what our budget is, and we bring in 11 million in other revenue to help pay for that. I just wanted to bring your attention to a few other notes on the bottom of this form on page 3 here. Our department uses 16.44% of the overall 2023 county tax levy. Of course, we're not done with 2024 yet and predicting that, so I, use those numbers. And so we used in 2023 or intend to use $3.8 million. Again, if we don't use this because some of our placements may not occur, some years they're higher than others. And if we don't have to, we certainly work hard trying not to spend money. And then that goes back to the general fund. And when you look at our budget, 23.83% of our entire budget is tax levy. I already talked about support staff, cost center, and just wanted to note there that all numbers are based off of round 2 budget totals of 9.7 are subject to change. And I went back and looked at our 2022 annual report because I really wanted to be able to tie together for you. We're doing these services. How many people are we actually touching? And when I did that for 2022, I determined that there was 15,683 people that we touched in our department as far as providing services to, and that's unduplicated. So the example of the home delivered meal, we may do that 5 days a week or 3 days a week, but I counted it as one person, not the amount of times that we touch that family, but one person touching. And so when you're looking at that 15,000, almost 16,000 people, it's, counted as once there. And that does not include the play group because I didn't have the numbers of that, but I know that in our Birth to 3 program, we have a play group that has, I know, over 300 and some families that have participated in that. And that's an ARPA grant. And so I didn't include that in these numbers, but if you would add that to it, we'd be well over the 16,000 people served. There's one other area I just really want to touch on that I'm not sure that people recognize or are aware of. So in an example, I gave you 3 different examples of programs that we have in our department, and there's more. These are just the ones I had at my fingertips to get this information for you. Through the programs that we serve, we also bring money into the community. So I consider that like an economic development piece of it. In our children's long-term support waiver for the cost to the county of $26,824, we infused $2.1 million worth of services into our community. That's what we're offering to our families. Our healthcare coverage and food share with that program, we're infusing $97 million into our community. And we just received a independent living grant for our ADRC, and that was for $3 million that we received to serve 430 customers in the 3-county area of Dunn, Eau Claire, and Chippewa, and 371,000 of funding directly to consumers for services. And then we also received the money to help provide for the staff and that. So that's infusing $3 million, almost $3.5 million into our community as part of economic development and services for that. So I wanted to end this with giving an opportunity for questions that you may have for me.
Thank you, Paul. That was very informative. Do we have any questions? Supervisor Prochnow. Maybe.
Maybe you gotta hit the right button, maybe. Seeing some new positions, I was just kind of curious, it's 218,000. What are the positions for, or what positions? I didn't write it down last time, I apologize.
That's okay. Yeah, it's a great question. So the 2 new positions that I'm asking for, and as Chris stated earlier, it's my role to ask when we have the need, right? So one of them is adult protection. What we're seeing with the baby boomers is that the adults at risk or needing investigations or protectively placed in settings or guardianships has really increased. And again, I can get you those numbers from last, board meeting too that I provided, if that would be helpful to you. So an adult protection worker to help with that. And then the second one is a therapist in our clinic that would be working with children with mental health from our child protection unit, and also clinical supervision for our workers, because we need to have that mandated by the regulations that we have with the programs.
Mr. Chairman, may I respond to Supervisor Prochnow's question? The increase in the adult protective services caseload this year has been
Well, I know, I see.
48%.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Okay, just wanted to double check, so I got the numbers.
Yeah.
And then of all these services, are they all mandated or, right?
No,
Not all.
not all of them. So
Okay.
we do have some that are not mandated, but what they do, when we decide whether we get involved in a service that's not mandated or not, we look at the big question of why.
Mhm.
Why would we be involved in something that's not mandated? And many times the answer is we can reduce areas that are mandated. So for example, family treatment court, that is not mandated. We have a grant for it. It covers a majority of it, not all of it. But what it does then is we have the data to show that our children, that parents that are in that program, the children have been reunified sooner. And so that's helped us with the trauma that kids face when they're in foster care or other type settings, and the cost of foster care placements. So it's helping in a way that, so there are programs in here that are non-mandated, but as we evaluate and bring them on, we're really looking at that big question of why. Why would we be involved?
No, they're all very good programs. I
Yep,
just curious. I just
for sure.
understand.
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
Mhm.
Anyone else? Doesn't look like it. John, did you have anything? I can't see your hand up at the moment, so if you do, call out. Okay, thank you so much, Paula.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And I apologize if I have a coughing fit here. It's ragweed season.
All right, I would invite the sheriff or marshal, whoever is going to speak to the sheriff's requests and or information they'd like to share.
It looks like we get both.
I'll do kind of an overview. Sorry, I didn't bring handouts like everybody else. I didn't know that was necessary. But I'll just give you an overview of the sheriff's office, and I'm sure most of you are familiar with it. We cover 300 or 860 square miles, 24/7, 365. I've got 29 sworn officers, including myself. 27 corrections officers, over 30 squad cars, all the equipment I would estimate probably you take a squad car out the street with all the equipment, the radios, computers, radars, cameras, everything in them. $60,000 to $70,000 per squad to outfit. We run a 160 bed facility with these 29 corrections officers, obviously mandated by statute. The sheriff must mandate or must maintain a jail and keep records of accounts of all incarcerated. And my patrol staff, sworn staff, has about 14,000 calls for service a year. My jail staff books in over 2,000 inmates a year with an average daily population of about 90 inmates. With that comes with feeding them, housing them with blankets and sheets and bedding and providing them medical and mental health services. So it obviously comes at a cost. I know our budget is a very large levy ask, and that's to be expected. We don't have a lot of revenue. We're not in the business of making money. That's just the reality, but it's a service that the county or the residents expect, and they want good law enforcement protection, and that's what I strive to provide. Getting into, I'll talk about two of I have two requests, position requests. One is a recreation deputy position, which would be 60% funded by state funds, reimbursed time and a lot of the equipment that goes into it. And that would cover our recreation patrol is snowmobile, ATV, UTV enforcement, and boating enforcement. So those hours, 60% of that position would be funded by state revenue. So the second position request is for my jail. It's probably no secret to you, but the jail is the highest liability to this county. If a county is going to get sued and lose millions of dollars, it's usually over something that happened in the jail, illegal strip searches, things like that. And we don't have 24-hour supervision right now. I've got 4 sergeants and a captain in the jail currently. 1 sergeant's dedicated to working Monday through Friday during the day and running all the court appearances and things like that, and handling all of the Huber work release schedules and things like that. And then I've got 3 sergeants that kind of split time and work a rotating shift, usually 9 a.m. to 5:30 and then 5:30 till 1 a.m. And then I'm left without supervision in my jail from 1 a.m. until when the sergeant comes back on at 8 a.m. or the captain comes in at 8 a.m. or so. So I'm looking to reduce the county's liability, my liability as a sheriff, by having 24-hour supervision in the jail like I do on patrol now. And I think it would be a benefit to all of us to make sure that happens. It's just, I've got a very young crew in the jail. You're aware of the turnover I've had in the last 4 years. I probably half my staff has less than 4 years on the job in there. So it concerns me as a department head, having this young staff without a lot of experience and being unsupervised, because where do the people with the least amount of seniority work is at nights, and after 1 a.m. they're unsupervised and I have to have a supervisor on call. I'll turn it over to my Chief Deputy Marshal Moltoff to go into some detail, kind of line by line, if you'd like, of our budget requests and the asks. He lives and breathes this budget every day, so I don't have to, thank God. So I'll turn it over to him with some details.
Afternoon. Like most departments, our biggest increases are in wages and salaries, which we all have to take on. That's a given. When it comes to the patrol side, our overtime has increased, and that's just a reality. When I started doing this budget approximately 7 years ago, our overtime budget was $120,000. Every year we were asked to cut that, which we agreed to the point that last couple of years it's been $60,000. Obviously, we cut it in half over the years. With the addition of the 12-hour shifts, we substantially reduced our overtime. But the reality is, when you're a 24/7 agency and things happen, you have to have the people there to deal with it, and you have to pay the bill. Example is about a week ago, we had a teenager missing and been missing for several hours. We had approximately 15 of our people up there for 5 to 10 hours, setting up command post, organizing search and rescue. It's one of those things you don't have a choice at. If something like that happens, you got to provide the people. It's expected by the county residents. Comes with that is overtime and additional costs. The increase in our overtime really isn't that much. It's from 59 and some dollars up to 70,000, but it is an 18% increase. Another increase is our maintenance contracts line item. And a good portion of that is when we update our camera server system for the camera system in the jail and the courthouse. They've reached their end of life. So as a part of replacing that is the original warranty is gone, and we'll have to start paying for a yearly maintenance contract warranty on that, which is approximately $12,000. We've also submitted a request for some cameras to be placed throughout the county, flock cameras, which have the ability to be tied in nationwide for the sharing of information on crimes. They can detect both vehicle descriptions and license plate numbers of anything that's put in there nationwide. It's almost a shared investigative tool. The next largest increase is fuel, 120,000, 147,000. We're going to be going over our fuel budget this year by quite a bit. Again, that's been cut over the years. As we all know, fuel prices have increased. I don't see them going lower anytime soon. So just to be realistic and not go over budget, we're putting in what this year's estimated cost for fuel increase would be. The next major increase is in our operating supplies. The biggest portion of that is $30,000. $30,000 is year one of a 5-year payment plan to TASER. All our officers are equipped with TASERs along with our jail staff. All of our TASERs reach the end of their life. You can't even buy the models we have anymore. Parts, batteries, everything, it's just not supported anymore. TASERs in the use of our officers' hands can reduce a lot of liability due to physical injuries to both our officers and the public. The easiest way to purchase TASERs to replace the ones we got is a contract with TASER, which provides us with all new TASERs immediately, along with all the cartridges necessary to equip them, training cartridges. But again, that's $30,000 a year over 5 years. We also have a equipment request under sheriff's equipment. What that is we had requested money to replace the server system in the courthouse. Like I discussed earlier, initially we had estimated $75,000 to replace that. Like anything, you estimated it too low. Part of that is we increased the server size to be able to be expanded to any cameras equipped here at the government center also. You're better off getting the size bigger right away rather than trying to fix it later. So the excess over 75, which is 57,850, which were quoted, is placed in this line item to reflect that. With the addition, if the approved position of the rec officer is realized, that would add approximately $75,000 to our equipment line item, which is for the purchase of a truck for that position, also with the equipment needed to equip that truck, as all other patrol deputies are. When we go to the jail side of the budget, basically everything that's an increase in the jail side is contractual. Like the sheriff said, when we have inmates, we got to feed them. We got to take care of their mental health needs as well as their medical needs. Those 3 line items have went up substantially, anywhere from the 5% to 11% to 12% increases. Speaking for our food line item, they went up over 11%. We're at the end of a contract with our current food provider. We put in an RFP. Even with putting on an RFP, they were still the lowest with an 11% increase. Again, that's something we just have to provide. The same as with the prisoner medical services contract, which went up 11%, and I believe it's 5% up for the mental health contract. It's again, it's something we're required to give to our inmates and provide them for their well-being. And it's just a bill, unfortunately, we have to pay. Do have a small increase in our maintenance contract line item. That is be due to the body scanner that we purchased under COVID grant has reached the end of its warranty period. So there's approximately $8,000 a year maintenance contract for that, which isn't so much the maintenance, but it is a $270,000 piece of equipment, which needs to be updated, both not just with software, but fixing it. So we discussed not getting the maintenance contract, but $8,000 is pretty small when it comes to when you think about fixing a $270,000 piece of equipment. That rounds out the increases and requests for the jail and sheriff's office. The first responders program has no increases in our requests. If anybody has any questions regarding any of those line items or some that I didn't cover, let me know and I can answer them as best of my ability.
Great, thank you. Questions? Supervisor Vogel.
Sorry, I have lots of questions. Because I was looking, so I find it, I was just looking at the numbers and they actually increased by 100,000 from what we saw at the workshop. Which was, what happened there?
The only thing that increased was I placed in the $75,000 for the rec deputy position. I was contacted by Beata, and she asked if we had submitted the associated equipment with the requested position. I said I hadn't, so that was the ad was 75,000. I don't believe there should have been any other additions since the last submission, but 75 of that was for the rec deputy vehicle and to equip the vehicle and the officer.
But aren't they using the boats and the ATVs and the UTVs?
We do have them, but by contract, if a deputy has to be assigned a vehicle, and their position would be for rec patrol, so they have to have a vehicle to tow the boat, trailers with the UTVs and all that. Everybody's assigned a vehicle, so there's really no spares. So when you add a position, you have to have a squad car. Same thing if we had any road deputies, you have to have an associated vehicle to go with them.
So someone's doing some of this already, right?
Right now, the way it's being done is we offer the time to do rec patrol, either whether it be boating during the summer, UTV or snowmobile. That's posted as overtime. And we allow them to sign up for it because we don't have anybody that can do it full time. So right now it's put out there. If somebody can do it, they do it, we get reimbursed at that rate. It's just not being fulfilled to the level it could be because of the shortness of manpower, not having somebody dedicated to full time. This would allow us to have somebody dedicated to it full time that would handle it all, including the billing to the DNR for reimbursement, training to clubs, as well as any unused time with them on rec patrol could be used to fill overtime on patrol vacancies.
So then shouldn't overtime go down instead of up?
It could be, which I think I said at the last meeting, but it's hard to quantify how much. I can't say it's going to go down 20, 25 or whatever, but that extra position would allow that to fill openings within patrol, which would reduce overtime.
I would say we should reflect that in the budget. And then, what are flock cameras?
Flock cameras, they're, what's that? Public space cameras. They're mounted on poles or structures such as bridges or guardrails, and that what they are is they're license plate reading cameras with also the ability to track. Say if we had a homicide here, one of the homicides I believe is in Altoona was solved through flock cameras. Their suspect, they had a vehicle description and a plate number. They inputted that into the nationwide flock system. That vehicle was picked up on a flock camera down in Illinois, where they were able to locate them and take them into custody. If we put information in the statewide system being under this, if we have a suspect and that car is seen as by color, description, or plate number somewhere else, we'll be notified of that. Same way is if someone in another state has a suspect and they put the information in, they drive down Highway 25 in our county, it catches, it'll notify us as well as them that it's now here. So it works both ways as far as information sharing.
Okay, and how much was that in the budget?
That is what they are $3,000 a year contractually per camera, but that we don't own them, then we don't have to maintain them. There's no additional money because if anything goes wrong with them, that covers the software and everything. It's flat $3,000 a camera. And when we looked over it, the best place to put these are entrances to your county as vehicle come in the main thoroughways. You can get their information. 10 is probably the very minimum to catch the largest amount of cars.
Can I ask one more? Or I'll let someone else.
No,
Go ahead.
Go for it.
go, okay, then Supervisor Kinnear.
Okay. So I had, then I was curious about the jail new position. So would this new position be in those overnight hours where there is?
It would be able to have us fill 24-hour supervisory coverage. It would fill the gaps that we currently have.
And if we didn't have the supervisor, then what would happen?
We would have the gaps we are with unsupervised younger employees. Nothing could happen or something bad could happen.
So it, like, we couldn't temporarily have the more senior kind of supervising them until they're kind
We
of-
just don't have enough supervisors to work 24 hours right now.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Supervisor Kinnear.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ann. Those are great questions some I hadn't thought of. I'd like to follow up a little bit, Marshall. In the understanding of the recreational officer, so if the recreation, I'm gonna lay out a couple scenarios and tell me if I'm off base.
I will.
If if the recreational officer spends all the time on the recreational part, they'd be reimbursed 60%.
There's a variance in there. It depends on whether it's ATV, UTV, boat or snowmobile. They're reimbursed at different rates
Okay.
through the DNR. It's between 75 and 60%, I believe, depending on
Okay.
what it is.
So if that officer worked 10% of their time in a month
Correct.
on recreational, they'd be reimbursed 60% of that 10%.
Correct.
Okay.
Obviously, our goal is to have them work as
Right.
much time as they possibly can. Obviously, there's a limitation. You can't work rec 24/7, 365.
Yeah, I think Sheriff explained really good what you'd really like to do. I'm thinking theoretically, a different sheriff or whatever, or change in could that position actually be used for whatever you'd like to use it for? Non-recreational.
40% of the time we would be additional staff. But
I recognize that part, but let's say you retired and someone else came and said, we don't want to do that. We don't want to do recreational. Could they just put that officer in some other position that's also useful?
A new sheriff could do anything with anyone they wanted.
Okay,
If you're talking possibilities, I would think it would be foolish because you're not getting the money for that position that you would put him doing something else. I mean, that's why we're kind of asking for it, because there's untapped money out there for something I think the county needs and is lacking is recreational enforcement, along with the educational side of it that position can offer to people, along with our own officers, because some of these things in recreation are the way things are enforced and statutes are different, obviously, than traffic statutes. We just don't do it enough.
and thank you very much.
Supervisor Prochnow.
Just quick question. Revenue, I see it went way down. What was the revenue and why is it going down?
Part of that revenue, the largest portion is the jail. A couple of years ago, we were offered a contract to hold state inmates at the jail.
Okay.
I think it was 10 to 15. We started with them and at that point, we tried to estimate the revenue that they were going to provide us over a year's basis based upon the number of inmates we wanted, but we don't control that. It's hard to put that out because we're getting money for the inmates, but they also cost us money, food and whatever like this. We had those state inmates for a while. We're realizing some really good revenue without increasing our staff at that time. Problem was, state, as they always do, changed their mind and decided they weren't going to give us inmates. And that combined with the COVID, with the less inmates, it's been really hard to plot out how much our revenue would drop after losing them. Now that we've had a couple years under it, unfortunately, this is the realization we come to is the actual numbers after having a couple of years of it dropping down to this. It's a part, may have been overestimated or a combination thereof, but this is the realistic number we can come up working with Viata where the revenue could be. That's the revenue lost. We estimated revenue gain from taking this on. They pulled it out from under us. We're finally back to the numbers that are reality.
And I can touch on that a little bit more, just so John can hear me too. The governor pulled out, there was 900 beds budgeted in the state budget for housing outside of state facilities. We got a contract with the state to house 15 inmates at $54.45 a day at 15, and we should have gotten $290,000 in revenue had they filled all 15 beds. COVID happened. We got stuck with the same 10 inmates for about 4 months, 5 months. And then the governor changed his budget to reduce that 900 beds down to 100 beds, and we lost our contract with the state to house inmates. So in the middle of last year's budget year, we reduced our revenue line item to show what we thought we could probably recoup, and realized that it was still set too high. Now, the governor has added housing beds back to his budget, around 500. So there is a possibility I can get back into a contract with the state to increase that revenue again, but that isn't until the 2024 budget. So we can't project that or put it in our revenue.
Thank you. Anyone else?
One more. if I may.
All right, Supervisor Kinnear.
You mentioned that an officer needs a vehicle. Now, would the sergeant in the jail need a vehicle also? No, okay. I wanted to just
Correctional
double
officers
check.
aren't a site squad, just
Okay.
sworn patrol officers.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you, Marshall. Thank you, Kevin.
If anybody has any questions, obviously after today, feel free to contact me.
Yeah, I got a
Oh,
question.
sorry.
Yeah.
Supervisor Steen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So let's say you got the recreational officer and you got a vehicle for that person. Would your time frame for replacing that be different than your normal rollover on purchasing vehicles?
Vehicles are difficult because we have officers that are all over the place, put miles on quicker. We have some that don't put any miles, different positions, responsibilities within the department. It's really hard to plot out how long a squad car will go. One, you might think, we're good for 4 or 5 years, and then they put on 30,000 a year just because they're out there moving around. We almost have to go from year to year. We'd like to replace anywhere from 4 to 5 a year, and that's what we try to stick around. But again, we have cars that break down. We have cars that are totaled. Mileage gets high, or else we run into some of these, like our 19 Ford F-150s are having engine issues. So sometimes we might try to roll them out quicker to save the money of the new engines like we paid for. So it's a constantly changing goal is what it is. I would think it'd be about the same, maybe a little less than a patrol officer.
If he's not doing the recreational job, then that vehicle would not be used, correct?
He would still be working, but he would be back filling overtime on patrol or filling shifts.
Okay, all right. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, this time for sure.
All right, Dustin.
Oh, well, thank you. I handed out a sheet to everybody this evening. I just wanted to show basically a high overview of the highway budget and how it compares from year after year. I went as far back as 2000. I could have went back to 1992, but that's when we started keeping records of this sort. As you can see, there's a portion of our highway budget that I showed that's revenue. Our revenue sources are county levy, which accounts for in 2023 was 3.7 million. As you can see, this has gradually gone down over the years. State aid, GTA, which is our gas tax that all counties get for gas tax that we all pay for. Obviously, that has stayed status quo, has slightly gone up over the years, but has pretty much stayed pretty flat over the last 23 years. We do have state aid, which is LRIP and STP, which is state projects that we apply for that potentially get granted additional funding. As you can see that that accounted for that has risen in years past, but that is not guaranteed every year. State maintenance. So we contract with the DOT. We maintain 206 miles of state roadways that we are contracted with the DOT. That accounts for approximately just $2.2 million annually. State PBM contracts, that's performance-based maintenance projects. That did not start until right around 2014. That is above and beyond the annual maintenance that the DOT performs. It's changes every year, but we basically contract with the DOT above and beyond our annual contract to perform some of this maintenance. And then obviously we do town and village work. That's another revenue source, which stays kind of status quo as well, right around that million to $1.4 million. We are seeing a downturn in that. The towns are actually in the same situation we are. There just isn't the funding to do what we need to do to maintain our roadways. And then last but not least, on the very bottom, as you can see, the vehicle registration fee, which started in 2020, that accounts for approximately $740,000, which I believe this year it's about 787, somewhere around there, that accounts. So if you look, our annual revenue has pretty much stayed status quo for the last 23 years. And we can all agree that the costs of everything have gone up. As I stated before, asphalt prices have gone up 40% just in the last 3 years. Lime rock prices have gone up right around that 30% in the last 3 years. Labor rates have increased dramatically. Not only do we have to pay our own employees higher rates, but also contractors that would come in and perform some of this work. As I stated before, we have 425 miles of road, which is 7th highest in the state of Wisconsin, that we need to maintain. We have mandated services to maintain our roadways. We can cut road projects, but we cannot cut maintenance. We will always have to be out on the roads to maintain our roadways, filling potholes, shouldering them, winter maintenance, a lot of things that we have to continue doing. The big reason for the increased budget for next year that we are requesting at Highway, county construction is a very large portion of our budget. We are proposing approximately $16.4 million worth of work. Of that $16.4 million worth of work, 60% of it is going to be paid with either federal or state dollars granted to those projects. Obviously, when you're talking $16.4 million, 40% is still a large number. We can either do these projects or we don't do these projects and we lose that funding. We would lose the federal funding, we would lose the state funding. And potentially if we would want to do this particular section of road, which we can all agree, County Road B is probably in a state of disarray right now. It needs to be done. To make those improvements, it does cost money, and unfortunately, it's a very, very large chunk. We are proposing 6 mile or 6 road projects next year, which is approximately 10.26 miles. Of that, like I said, 12 million of that 16 million is County Road B, The 1.5 mile stretch of roadway, which will be proposed to be concrete instead of asphalt due to the large truck traffic, Walmart distribution, Love's, Quick Trip, interstate traffic. Unfortunately, to build the road to accommodate that, it costs money. Going back to our spreadsheet, if you noticed, one of the big reasons that our budget was as high as it was the past few years is due to ARPA funds. Our budget was backfilled with ARPA funds. We took a pretty good significant chunk out of the county ARPA funds that were allocated. As you can see in 2023, we accounted for, I believe it was just over $2 million, and in 2022 it was 3 million. So of that, the last 2 years we've accounted for just over $5 million to backfill our budget. Unfortunately, this is not sustainable going forward. We are doing everything in our power to try to cut costs wherever we can at highway. We are at a bare bones employee number right now. We have 51 employees. On a given day, when we're paving roadways, we have every employee working on that particular project. We have, I did request a position for next year, an engineering tech position, as we can all agree that times are changing. There's a lot of paperwork involved and a lot of hurdles to jump through with these federal grants and state funds. There's a lot of paperwork that goes involved with it. It's taking a huge load of my time, as well as the assistant commissioner's time. We are outsourcing some of our engineering projects just to try to help accommodate some of these needs. I would anticipate every year would change. But I would say on average, it would probably, we spend about $50,000 in engineering costs, above and beyond, our internal costs, to complete these design projects. I believe, I believe this, position would account for approximately 80-some thousand, annually, for this new position. So a portion of it, like I said, could be, a cost savings with engineering design help that we could do in-house. Like I said before, we do everything we can in our power. Unfortunately, the rate of inflation has caught up with us, and our budget has stayed status quo. Price of everything has skyrocketed, as we can all agree. Groceries, everything we do at the highway department has a cost to it. Just to maintain our county roadways during the wintertime, salt has increased 40%. We try to reduce our costs of salt by using brines, salt sand, everything we can to try to reduce those costs. We limit the overtime. We do very little overtime in the summer months. We do obviously have a little bit of out of our control in the winter months with Mother Nature. We have tried to implement a 2-inch rule before we will respond to winter maintenance and plowing. That doesn't always work out that great. We have more accidents probably in a 1-inch snowstorm than we do in a 1-foot snowstorm. So we're trying everything we can. Unfortunately, it's the battle of the beast of what costs are right now. And as I stated before, we can continue doing less and have our roads deteriorate, or we can try to improve that. Any questions?
Thank you, Dustin. What's our replacement time at the moment?
Roadways?
Yeah.
Right now we are doing approximately 10 miles of roads each year with 425 miles of road. It's about 42 years.
And the recommendation would be?
Lifespan of road is 20. So
Thank
we got to
you.
double that.
All right, anyone else have questions?
Just one
Supervisor,
point. Oh, go ahead.
Supervisor Quick.
Randy, go ahead. I just wanted to point out on County Road B, I mean, that was done 19 years ago. That we're working, that we just finished.
Yeah, so the portion of County Road B that we just finished paving this past week, from Packer Drive to Double B was done 19 years ago.
Just to put it in reference that
And as you can see, it was deteriorated
40
much
years,
earlier than that.
just what I want to point out.
Thanks, Supervisor Prochnow.
Looks
Supervisor
really
Quick.
nice too. Does, just a couple of questions to get my mind straight. So in 2023, the county construction budget is about 6.5 million. And you're saying your proposed budget for 2024 is 16.4 million? Am I right
No,
with that?
so, so the total project cost in 2024 is we're looking at $16.4 million worth of work, construction costs. 60% of that is going to be funding from, the feds or state funding.
Okay.
So we would be locally, we would be on the hook for, I believe it's 7 million. I believe.
So that.
What you see in 2023 of that 6.5,
Yeah.
that includes County Road B that was supposed to take place this year. But
Oh,
we had to
okay.
push the project off till next year.
Okay.
So
All
a
right.
portion of our budget this year will pay for next year carry forward. But that's not included in our additional costs.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
All right. Yep. Thank you.
Supervisor Vogel.
So one thing looks like, your revenue from other funds went down 3 million. You know what?
I believe that's the ARPA funds.
Well, the ARPA was, it looks like 2 million, but there's like an other fund line for 3,016,000 that disappeared.
That was,
What was that?
I would, yeah, Yada can speak to that.
I was figuring that one.
I don't have it in front of me, so I don't.
Yes, thank you for the question. I appreciate it. So in 2023, when we did the budget, we took all the levy. We've applied to those departments that needed, in addition to the fund balance that was approved. That was the remaining money that that remained after all the departments were given their needed levy and fund balance. And then that's what was remaining. We applied that to the highway.
So typically, the highway gets about $3.9 million of levy each year. And last year, there was between fund balance and a levy unspent in other areas, unnecessary in other areas, that difference was applied to the highway department. So that we didn't automatically give that back to them this year.
Supervisor Zons.
Dumb question, but I suppose there's nothing the county can do since that County Road B project was delayed because of the railroad. And so pretty much all that extra cost really is because of their delay. So can we send them a bill or anything?
Unfortunately, no. But yes, there was a significant increase just from last year to this year due to that delay. And that B project, just to give for reference, this project started in 2016 when we were initially granted the funding for this project. It's a very, very long process, unfortunately, especially when you have the state and the federal government involved.
And the railroad.
And even worse, the railroad.
Yeah. Thanks.
Anybody else? Okay, Dustin, it looks like you're off the hook for the moment. Thank you.
All right, and last, I'd invite Carmen up. And again, I realize that there's not a specific levy ask, but I would say that in at least half of the conversations that I had with supervisors, there were questions about the status of NDC and just thoughts about all of that. So I invited Carmen to give us some information.
So I just have my laptop so I can see better. So I'm not looking constantly up there. Okay, well, thank you for having me to talk with you today. As Chris mentioned, this isn't specifically about a levy ask. It is more about general conversation about the state of nursing homes in our community, as well as what the services we provide for our residents, and then also some background information of why there isn't a levy ask this year. So first off, it's just about the state of our senior living community is where we're going to start. So if you can, next slide. Okay, elderly population increases. Is there a, oh, and do you have a remote? Oh, okay. Okay. Sure. Okay, elderly oh, no. There, we can just say there. So elderly population increases. So this isn't any new information. It's pretty widespread information that our population is aging. So in 1990, there was 3.1 million US citizens that were above the age of 65. That was about 4.1% of the population of the United States. By 2020, that number has increased to 55.8 million US citizens above the age of 65. That's now 16.8% of the United States population. From 2010 to 2020, the increase alone in that decade was 15.5 million to age into 65 plus. That's twice as rapid of the increase of previous decades. And then it's also the greatest increase that we've seen since the 1800s as people started to actually age into 65 plus. Okay. You can click again on there. Okay, so Dunn County impact. So that was on a national numbers. It's also affecting us in Dunn County. So in 2010, 65 plus made up about 12% of the population in Dunn County. And then by 2020, 65 plus made up 16.9% of the Dunn County population. And then projected by 2040, the projected percent of Dunn County's population that'll be over 65 is 26.3%. So in the graph to the right is the actual numbers of people in our county that are over 65. Okay. So the good question here is why? Why is our population growing this much? So the obvious answer is baby boomers. That's the group of, or the population born between 46 and 64. They make up 76.4 million people in the United States. So that was the number that was actually born during that time frame. Since then, obviously, some people have passed away, moved out of the country, things like that. The number actually does still stay right about at that 76.4 million, also based on people coming into our country as well. So that is the current amount of people that are in the United States that are in the baby boomer generation. By 2029, all baby boomers will be 65 plus. And at that time, according to the Census Bureau, they project that 61.3 million baby boomers will still be alive. So that's the amount of people 65 plus that our country will be caring for. It's also because of an increase in average life expectancy. So not only are we having more people age into that lifespan, but we're also having people live longer. So you can hit one more time, Dan. So this is a graph about average life expectancy. Life expectancy has gone consistently up over the past few decades. The only exception to that is the years that COVID-19 started that did have a slight drop in life expectancy, but they are predicting that to go back up again as modern medicine continues to advance. Next slide, please. All right, so the state of long-term care. So what does all of our aging population mean? We're having more and more elderly people enter into long-term care facilities, and then we're having less and less long-term care facilities. So according to the CDC, there are currently 15,600 skilled nursing facilities in the United States. In those skilled nursing facilities, there's 1.7 million beds. So for reference, the Neighbors has 137 beds. So that's the total beds in every nursing home in the country. Dunn County currently has 4 skilled nursing facilities, 3 of which are the Neighbors. There's only one other. 174 skilled nursing facility beds are in Dunn County, which 137 are the neighbors. And then the decrease in skilled nursing home beds in our community. So since 2016, 64 nursing homes in the state have closed. So that's in the less than decade. And then 12 of those nursing homes have been within 50 miles of us. And then on the next slide, I have a list of all the nursing homes that are within 50 miles of our area that have closed in the last few years since 2016. So it lists off the year that they closed. So it's all around our area. 3 of which have closed this year. So Pioneer Home in Prairie Farm, Colfax Health and Rehab, which was the other facility in Dunn County, and then Heritage of Elmwood all closed this year. So these are the 12. I did have the Severson Lutheran Home in Eau Claire italicized because it closed, but because they opened a new building. But then subsequently, Grace Lutheran Prairie Point Altoona was the new building they owned, which also closed in 2022. Next slide, please. This is a graph provided by Leading Age Wisconsin that shows the decrease in beds. So not only are nursing homes closing, but some are decreasing their bed size. So some buildings that were 75 beds, 50 beds are going down to 30. There's been nursing homes that have been 200 beds going below 50, things like that. So over the past couple of years, so this graph is from March of 2020 to January of 2023. The state went from 28,719 beds to 25,891 in just a couple of years. Right. So where are people going to go? So that's a good question. We don't have enough places for people to go. So some of the options other than skilled nursing facilities are home when they are not ready to go home. And one of the reasons that that is not the best viable option is it ends up with more hospitalizations, higher healthcare costs, and more issues for both the family and the resident themselves. To a lower level of care than SNF or skilled nursing facility when they need a skilled nursing facility, that has similar outcomes to the same situation as going home, as well as shortly after that, they'll still be referred to the nursing home from the assisted living or another healthcare entity. Skilled nursing home facilities outside of their community. So we're seeing that right now. We get referrals from all over the state, the Midwest, and sometimes even the country. People trying to find a bed. They can't find one in their own community, so they get referred to whatever nursing home is accepting people. This is a kind of a sad thing. People live their entire lives in a community, and then they can't live there when they need care. So they have to go somewhere else. This also makes it difficult for families, traveling to visit, things like that, as well as even touring a nursing home because they aren't in the community. They have to just go where they can go. So that's obviously not a great option. And then the final other place is staying in the hospital. And this is a huge issue right now. All of our hospitals are at max capacity. This has been going on for years. We have, for an example, we had a resident admitted from Hudson this week because they went to Mayo. They couldn't get in Menominee, couldn't get in Eau Claire because there was no beds. So they were diverted to Hudson. So, and staying in the hospital just keeps a bed that they wouldn't need to be there. And that's filling a bed that someone that might actually need a hospital bed can't have. So think of when you have an emergency of a car crash or a heart attack or anything that truly needs hospital care, currently filled by someone who could be in a skilled nursing facility. Next slide, please. And so differences in ownership. So kind of changing waves a little bit here. So now that we talked about what skilled nursing facilities are experiencing right now, difference in ownership. So there's 3 types of ownership of skilled nursing facilities. They are for-profit, not-for-profit, and then government owned. So currently in Wisconsin, 54% of nursing homes are owned by a for-profit corporation. 32 are owned by not-for-profit entities, and 14 are owned by government entities. That can be counties. There are a couple of state-owned nursing homes, and then there are also some municipality-owned nursing homes. Government and not-for-profit nursing homes are frequently grouped together as they have a mission-driven organizations versus a for-profit. So they're typically grouped in for things like associations and things like that, because they do share a more mission focused outlook instead of simply the business aspect of it. So this is comparing the different ownership types. So there are studies out there about comparing ownership types based on quality as well as deficiencies and things like that. So for-profit nursing homes are statistically more likely to have more deficiencies, have lower 5-star ratings on CMS's website, be special focus facilities, which means that the state takes a special focus in them because of poor history of poor quality, excuse me. And that means more frequent surveys. They are listed as a special focus facility on the internet, and then they also have more fines and things like that. And they also have lower staffing ratings. Not-for-profit and government nursing homes are more likely to have higher quality measures, fewer pressure injuries, higher star ratings, and also less deficiencies. And then over on the right, it's actually the 5-star rating breakdown for Wisconsin. So this is an average of all Wisconsin nursing homes. For-profit nursing homes are averaged at a 2.7 out of 5 stars. Not-for-profits are averaged at a 3.1, and government-owned nursing homes are averaged at a 4.1. And for reference, 2 of the 3 neighbors nursing homes are currently at a 5-star and 1 is at a 4-star. And that star rating is based on health inspection, staffing, and quality measures. Okay. So now to get a little bit more of the budget part of it, I kind of came up with a frequently asked questions that are questions I know I receive, I know Chris receives, and I'm pretty sure a lot of you receive from constituents. So this is kind of answers to those questions. And if you have more questions, I'll be happy to answer those after this as well. So how are we projecting to be in the black in 2024? I think this is probably the biggest question we get asked after seeing the budget for this year. That we did project and have a budgeted surplus in 2024. There's a couple of reasons for that. We have worked pretty extensively to do basically a pro forma on our own. Chris, Beata, myself, Jane, and Jenna have worked since the beginning of the year, I believe about 9 months, working on projecting what we can do to have the neighbors be financially efficient, as well as looking at rate increases, lowering agency costs, and the amount of beds that we want to have open. So having households that have been closed, reopen, things like that. You could hit next. Thank you. So that's, as I mentioned, increased rates. So Medicaid rates have increased substantially over the past few months. This is part of the governor's new budget. One of the things that you've heard me talk about on the legislative agenda for years is Medicaid rates. Every single budget cycle, we request increase of rates and we throw out percentages and hope that we get an increase. Typically, it's been a small jump a few years ago. The last budget cycle, we got a fairly significant bump. Now we got both a significant bump as well as a payment standard. So that was a huge win for nursing homes and other healthcare entities that use Medicaid. Because instead of having to fight for increases and having non-sustainable increases, it is now written into the budget that increases will be based on the median cost plus 25%. So that means as our costs go up and all the other costs of every nursing home in the state go up, our payment will also go up. So that has a huge impact on our budget going forward, as our rates have already increased and then also will continue to increase. Secondly is lowering agency costs. So this is always a goal that is our number one cost that throws our budget into haywire. It is a cost that we don't want to incur, but at times do have to incur to make sure that we're providing care for our residents. Similar to, as the sheriff and marshal said, when we have people there, we got to take care of them. So we do have to inquire some of those costs. But we are working to lower those costs, as well as we have already reduced our amount of agency. Part of that also goes back to the closing of other nursing homes. Unfortunately, we have had several nursing homes in our area close, and we would all hope that that meant we got all of their staff. Unfortunately, Part of the reason they closed is they didn't have a lot of staff in the first place. They're in the same boat as everybody else, but we have had quite a few staff. So a lot more than we've had in the past couple of years. I would say in the past 3 months, we had more internal interviews and hires than we probably have in the last 2 years. Having orientation with 5 to 6 people in it instead of 1 every month has been very nice. And we're hoping to maintain that. So lowering agency costs is part of that. And then opening households. So we're really looking at where do we break even for fixed cost. So if we don't have enough staff, not having all the households full was something that we truly strive to make sure we had enough staff to care for the people we had and still provide the quality of care that people expect and deserve. But now we're also looking at, okay, so if we increase a little bit of cost, but we also increase more revenue, looking at that break even point. So actually, as of this week, I'm happy to say that Fireside Manor in Central has reopened. Currently, there are only 2 residents in it, but we are working to fill that only to about half capacity at this point, to remain able to only have 2 staff members down there instead of increasing past that point. Next, please. Okay, the second question, why should the county be in the nursing home business? And I know this is a loaded question. I am going to go a little bit back to the conversation about quality. We do provide excellent quality nursing home care. And that is something that our community has grown to expect and quite frankly deserve. It is something that we do well. And it is a service to our residents that live in our county. And even if the county did not operate the Neighbors is the biggest provider in our area. As I mentioned, we are 137 of 174 beds in our entire county. And even outside of our county, the surrounding area around us is lacking care. It is something that we really truly need to have in our community to serve the population that we have and are going to continue to have as our population grows. Okay. Why have we not converted to CBRF? So this is a question I get frequently, and CBRF is a form of assisted living. It's community-based residential facility. This was something that was talked about many years ago. There was actually a performa done on this. There's many reasons we haven't transformed into a CBRF. One of the main reasons is there's a process called heightened scrutiny that requires any nursing home that is owned by a government entity to go through a process to transform the building into a CBRF. It takes about 5 to 6 years is what it took St. Croix to do. And that is so that they can accept MCO dollars, which is managed care organizations. So that is like Inclusa. They just got bought out by Humana, but or My Choice Family Care. It's basically contracted out Medicaid. So if we currently converted to a CBRF, we could do it as long as we did the conversion to get licensed that way, but it would all have to be private pay. And for reference, currently our nursing home is over 70% Medicaid. So we would not have a lot of residents if we required all private pay, as it is extremely expensive. So that's probably the biggest reason. Secondly, our community actually has a lot of CBRFs. Our market is oversaturated with CBRFs. So we really don't have the need for that form of care here in our community. Where we really do have the need is nursing home care. All right. And then past history and performance of the neighbors. So this is a question that's also loaded. So there's been a lot of talk about the past history and performance of the neighbors, looking at the different years and how they came out on the bottom line. So Dan, if you want to go to the next slide. So this is probably really small. And I can send this out to everybody too. This is a document that you would have all gotten last year. This only has through the last year's audit, as this year's audit is not completed yet. So it does not include 2022 numbers, but it does have through 2021. So if you look way kind of at the bottom, I can point the line. That grade line is the actual income and loss of the neighbors. So if you could see it better. So when you're looking at every year since 2012 to 2021, it does not include 2022, but through 2012, sorry, through 2021, there's only 1 year that operations was not in the black, and that was 2013, the year that the building was built. So I can just read off the numbers as well. In 2012, the number was $313,000, $313,000. In 2013 was a loss of 337. 2014 was $606,000 in the black. 15 was 308. 16 was 820. 17 was 1.1 million. 18 was 186,000. 19 was 209,000. 20 was 787,000, and 21 was 1.5 million. And in full transparency, 22 was not in the black. So I didn't not include it because it wasn't the best number. It's not, but it just wasn't ready on this form yet as the audit is not complete. So it really is an anomaly the last couple of years. And that's something that we were working to try to figure out is it an anomaly or is it something that's going to continue? So our group has put quite a bit of time and effort into looking into, is this something that's going to continue? And we truly believe that we will be able to have it be in the black again and going forward from here. Okay, does anyone have any questions for me about any of this or anything else neighbors related?
Supervisor Steen.
Yes, thank you, Carmen, and I'm glad we have a nursing home. Do you have any idea how many of the for-profits show profit?
I do not. I do not know off the top of my head. I would say, well, I'm not even gonna guess. I do not have an answer to that.
Okay, my second question is, do you have any information on what year will the baby boomers age group decline?
It would all be based on life expectancy and death rates, which I also would not. I again could make an educated guess, but it wouldn't be
Well, and
accurate.
the reason for my question is just like Social Security, everybody's wringing their hands and saying things are going to heck,
Mhm.
but eventually that's going to go the other way
Mhm.
because guys my age will die, you know, and so that's going to change the outlook
Yeah.
going forward, and therefore, if you're figuring for a disaster now, but it's going to go away after 20 years or whatever,
Mhm.
you know, that should be reflected, I should think. And then second, my third question, your years in the black, as a nursing home, did that reflect the debt payment also?
It did not. So it did not reflect the debt payment. So this document was created after we redid how we were accounting for the debt payment. As the building of the neighbors, even if the county did not operate the neighbors, the county would get the funds from the building if it was sold. So really that isn't a neighbor's expense because the county owns the building. So that is just operating budget. And then to address the change in 65 plus, so our pro forma that we're working on goes out for the next several years, but it is something that we can adjust based on all different factors. So both increase in revenues or decrease in revenues depending on the situation, as well as expenses up and down. So if something like that changes, if some catastrophic thing happens where our outlook on people that need nursing home changes, if there's regulatory changes, if any of those things changes, we can change that pro forma as well and then represent it.
I would hazard a guess that the train left. I had a thought. It was a good one too, but the train left. If it comes back, I'll answer. And thank you very much.
I'll note that the Medicaid numbers and the staffing numbers and all of that, having been on the neighbors committee, that's fantastic. I'm really happy to see that. Gary Steen.
Trains in reverse. Wait a minute here. How do I want to say it? I think the train might be taking on water. No.
Well,
My point being is that, when the, impact of the baby boomers, does not have the impact it has now, it's going to have a profound effect on nursing homes and also the medical industry altogether. Because the fact that we have no beds now and hospitals, you get sent to La Crosse if something's wrong with you, I should think that that will change because of the number of the reduced number of people that need that type of care. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think over the next 15 to 20 years, healthcare is going to change drastically. I can't predict which way it's going to go, but something will change, I'm sure.
Supervisor Prochnow and then Supervisor Quinn.
Just in case you open another house, how many beds are that? And you said you're gonna be like half of those are gonna be full?
Sure. Yeah, so each house is roughly 16 beds. Our memory cares are a little bit smaller. Currently, we are only having 8 residents there because it reduces the level of staff we need. So then we can share a nurse with another house. If we get to the point staffing wise that we can fill that house, we will do so as well.
Supervisor Quinn.
Thank you. So what do you see as the biggest problem you gotta solve in order to be able to open up more houses?
So currently we only have 1 household closed, well, 1.5, because we only open that one halfway. I would say staffing is always going to be the #1 problem. And that's something that I know is across all industries, but healthcare it's its own beast. So staffing is by far our biggest concern. And like I said before, we're very stronghold on we're only going to admit those that we can care for at the level that we always have. So right now we're kind of slowly easing in and then seeing if we can admit more after that.
And what are the solutions to solve the staffing problem?
Oh, if you know them. There's quite a few different solutions that we've tried. We've tried different marketing things. We are working on CNA training programs still. We have worked with other local institutions like the schools and CVTC, things like that. There really just is a shortage of people. Part of the 65 plus getting older is there's also a lot less younger people. So there's a generation of baby boomers, and now there's generations of people only having 1 or 2 kids, or not having kids at all. So it's really hard to predict how to fix that. But we have been very fortunate in the last couple of months of filling quite a few positions, whether that be from the closures or other entities coming to us too. So I don't have a one thing to fix it all, but if you think of it, let me know.
Well, I'm just wondering if there's any, is there any rationale for looking to some sort of immigration reform that would allow workers from other countries to come and deal with this problem?
Yeah, that is something that there has been quite a bit of work on, and I do think that is one of the things that could greatly help the situation. There are a couple of programs that other nursing homes have attempted to do where they do interview and then hire, but they are responsible for housing. So then that gets into a whole nother issue in our community is housing. So that is something that people have tried. I know there's a nursing home in Barron that's been quite successful in it. But then there's also some other people I've talked to that have been working on it for 2 years and still haven't gotten anyone. But I do think that is a really good option if it was an easier process. There are quite a few people in the Philippines specifically that want to come here and work in healthcare entities, but currently the process is very difficult.
Well, I had this, I don't know, a dream or a thought, or maybe my train left and came back for a while, but we have since the spring in Dunn County, a staff person from the federal government whose job it is to coordinate federal services throughout the area. It's called a kind of community partnership program or something, I think. And she's very good, but it's a difficult job. But I keep thinking, and this group of counties is sort of tasked with identifying priorities and projects that they can work on. And then she is responsible for helping to facilitate whatever interaction among the federal government's programs is needed. And I keep thinking that if a nursing homes in the area, it's like a 7-county area, would say, we would like to pilot a immigration program and really ask her to see if there's any appetite for that kind of thing in the federal government. There might be.
Yeah, I know there are programs that exist right now. They're just very difficult, but I'd be willing to talk with you about those as well and work through that because that would be wonderful.
Supervisor Kinnear.
Thank you. Carmen, you really did a nice presentation today, laid it out so I can understand it easily. Just kind of a thought. It's a service we're providing. And the county board says in the end, whether we think the service is worth it. And I really do think it's worth it. All the things you laid out just make it even more important to recognize that. So, and I think they're doing a great job. You are doing a great job and the staff.
Thank you.
That looks like it. Carmen, you're off the hook. Oh, sorry, John.
That's okay, sorry. Thank you, Carmen. You mentioned that you could share that audit document with us. Would you be able to share the entire presentation in an email?
Sure, I can do that.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
All right. Thank
Okay.
you.
So that was a huge chunk of information, and we were about to embark on another huge chunk of information. So I'm going to go ahead and give us a recess until 5:25, which is about 8 minutes. I call us back to order. And it's back to the county manager's report.
All right, I'm going to go a little bit out of, because I already sort of started out of schedule, but I'm just going to run through a couple things really quickly because they don't require much time. So Beata and I had a meeting earlier or last week with our financial advisor, one of our financial advisors, PMA, and they also are advocating to do some of our bond advising. So they're being helpful. And so they are going to run some modeling for us that will be available for your October meeting about around what certain amounts of, okay, let me say this differently, around where, if borrowing was needed, where could you borrow without raising the mill rate? And so that will be available for your October meeting. I do want to say that we believe that and in looking at it again, a number of different times, we believe that whatever you choose to do with salary, benefit, step percentage, COLA increases, as well as new positions, that we can cover those costs with what we've come to call our wage variance. So the simplest way for me to explain that is if we spend on average, if we budget on average $45 million for salaries, the last several years, we've spent closer to say 41 million. If we go up to 47, we're probably going to spend 43. So there's a gap, there's some buffer in there that we believe that we can cover salaries. So when you take that 6.3 million that we're currently at, and you take the 2 million, whatever you choose to do with those salary and new positions, take that 2 million off, it leaves us at about that $4.3 million gap.
Mr. Chairman, may I?
Supervisor Morehouse.
Just a clarification, Chris. So it would cover the salary and step increase and the new positions?
Yes.
Thank you.
Whatever, again, those could be pared down, you can change the amounts, but whatever that dollar amount ends up being, unless you want to double it. But just being funny. Okay. And then, okay, so I'm going to circle back. I will first of all, I would be remiss if I didn't say this. Doesn't it just make you incredibly proud to be here and work with these people when you listen to those department heads talk about what they do and how well they know it? it just makes me so incredibly proud to be a part of a team of people who take their work so seriously and really understand the ins and the outs. And that was very, very heartwarming. So speaking of heartwarming, one of the things that I absolutely appreciate about Dan Dunbar is he has the same mind with me as I do, in the sense that we won't let something rest until we figured it out. So we have spent probably 15 to 20 hours over the last few days figuring out a at least somewhat answer to the question that came up, or the questions that came up at the end of the county board workshop around, kind of how do you keep property taxes within, don't raise property taxes kind of thing. And I realize that that's not a universal desire, but there certainly are some members of the board that feel strongly about that. So that caused us to dig into sort of, well, how do property taxes work? So I'm going to invite Dan to the podium. We're going to tag team running you through a PowerPoint presentation that we came up with. And I promise you will be confused when we're done, because we have had to be confused ourselves.
What if we start confused?
Well, hopefully we're going to clear up some confusion. So let me, oops, shoot, I shouldn't have done that. I gotta. I have to share first, I guess. And let me get to the start. All right. So what we hope to accomplish this time is in our tagline, understanding property taxes, maybe, sorta. Because it is easy and it's complicated. So this morning I asked the highway department, or highway committee, if I asked, do you think that there's a universal understanding of what is meant when we say municipality? And it kind of got a little bit of a maybe sort of response from them. So I thought, so that we're all speaking the same language. We are the county, but we also, when you talk about taxes and property taxes, we need to speak about the municipalities, 3 forms: cities, villages, and towns. And how many do those 30 do we have of those? 30 of those city, villages, and towns in Dunn County. And then the next question is regarding taxation districts. So when we get to the end and we look at property tax, or we look at a property tax bill, you'll see that many different pieces fit into that in terms of who has the ability to assess property taxes: counties, school districts, technical colleges, municipalities, all those cities, villages, and towns. And then there are also special districts, sanitary districts, lake districts, drainage districts, etc. So that's just to kind of give just for you to plant those seeds in your brain as we move forward on this. So here's some definitions that are important. And I believe it's the last one that really rolls them up. But an assessment is the value of a property as determined by an assessor for the purpose of determining property taxes. This determines what portion of the local property tax is covered by your property. And assessors are required to be certified, and they are hired by local municipalities. Sometimes they're employed by local municipalities, particularly cities might have a city assessor. equalized value is an estimated fair market value for all taxable property in a taxation district in one of those cities, counties, cities, towns, villages and school districts, technical college districts. And then the last point, assessed value is important in maintaining fairness between individual property taxpayers. So people who live in the same taxation district, sitting,
Municipality.
say, well, you're right,
Municipality.
municipality, you're right, because, yep. Good,
Yeah.
thank you. Same municipality, and equalized value maintains equity between municipalities. So between the town of Colfax and the town of New Haven, etc. So levy, it's the money that a county or a municipality needs from property taxes to operate. In this case, let's assume it's $1 million. $1 million, the county needs $1 million. Look, we're gonna narrow it to a taxing entity. We're gonna say the county. The county needs $1 million of levy. To get this $1 million, the tax district must determine how much each municipality must pay. So Mythical County has 1 township, 1 city, and 1 village. And the county is going to levy that $1 million. And it's going to be split between those 3 municipalities. So we're going to delve into this a little bit more, but on the left half of it, you essentially see, after the assessors have done all of their work, the total assessed value for the town is $7 million. The city is 12, the village is 1 million, and the county has a total of $20 million. Totally made up numbers. I have no idea if they're even based anyplace in reality. But if you take that total $20 million, the town represents 35% of the assessed value, the city 60, the village 5, and then the county total for 1,000 or for 100. The equalized value, which is determined by the Department of Revenue, again, sort of fair market value or the most probable selling price, for the town is $12.5 million. City's 13.5, village is 1.5, and the county total is 27.5 million. And lest you think that that town number is like exaggerated or for the purposes of exaggeration, it's actually somewhat understated. There are towns in which the equalized value is twice as much as the assessed value in Dunn County. So again, if you look at those percentages in comparison between the towns and the town assessed value and the town equalized value, the township carries a greater portion of the equalized value than the assessed value. Same thing with the city. Actually, same thing with all of them, but it gets very small when you get to the village. And then on the left, you see if the towns paid, the town, city, village, if all the people paid the assessed value portion of their $1 million, that would be the numbers on the left-hand side. And if they paid the equalized portion, that would be the numbers on the right-hand side. So you can see why, and we're going to get to this question later on, but why don't we just make it easy and just bill people on their assessed value? And there's a number of reasons for doing that, but not the least of which you see that when that gets equalized out, it really balances it out over in a very different way. Any questions about any of that? Oh, yeah.
Only one question. Can we trust the assessor?
So, I mean, I think there's a video.
Supervisor Quinn, actually.
I'm sorry, Chris. Yeah. I don't want to confuse things, but so in the town, there is a fairly high percentage of the values in farmland. And farmland is assessed for tax purposes at a use value rate, which means it's assessed for what the rental rate is, which doesn't necessarily reflect which doesn't reflect what the actual sales price would be. How does that figure into this, you know? Already, here we go.
On this hypothetical, nothing. So that's just the total assessed value, which they take that in consideration.
So it's a
But
separate
for this
question.
situation, it really doesn't make any
Okay,
difference.
all right, just.
Right. And I was just gonna say sort of in to Supervisor Steen's funny comment. So I think there is this, you know, especially as people get their reassessment information, and there's this sort of thing of, I saw a great video where they showed the assessor as this dark figure lurking in the doorway. But I hope it becomes clear as we work through this that they really don't have a lot of skin in the game in terms of any reason to overinflate your assessed value. All right, so in our mythical village, or in our mythical county, the village has to collect $73,000 in taxes. There are 10 homes in the village, and each one is assessed at $100,000 each. Thus the $1 million of assessed value if you go back to the state's the slide before. In this simple equation, each home would pay $7,300 in property taxes. I'd probably be squawking about that because that's a lot, but for the purposes of this illustration, it's simple math. Now let's say that the housing market gets really hot and each home doubles in value to $200,000 each, or $2 million of assessed value. But the tax amount, because of levy limits, remains at that should be $73,000, not $7,300, 73,000. There's still 7,300. Okay. So the value of the houses has gone up and the property tax needed is the same. In this case, each homeowner still just pays what they paid, even though the value of their home has doubled, because the amount that needs to be taxed hasn't changed. The complications occur when some houses' assessed value remains the same and some houses go up. And there's a bazillion reasons for that. We could lengthen this presentation out by another 20 minutes to talk, or 2 hours to talk about that. But I think we probably all have some example of that we could point to, where the valuations change. If half the houses stay at 100,000 and half of them go to $200,000, then that tax, $73,000 of tax burden shifts. 5 of them will actually see a tax decrease to $4,818, and 5 of them will see an increase to $9,636. Does that make sense to people? Perhaps not, but and please don't feel even remotely thinking that there's a silly question, because we have, I think Dan and I've come back together three or 4 times to just be like, okay, we think we have it, and then it sort of slips between our fingers. So is this you?
So yes, the equalized value that we had talked about is not done by an assessor. It is done by the Department of Revenue. They may be an assessor, I guess, but it is not done by the municipalities, done by the state. So those values are based on the items that are listed in the bullet points here, but it isn't necessarily a function of the assessed value so much as it is a function of the economy or other aspects that may impact the value of a municipality. Flip to the next one.
The assessor has to provide all that information.
Yes,
So, yeah.
yes, but it is the determinations are being made by the Department of Revenue. So as we follow the taxes through, how do we break up this $1 million and give this out to the different areas? So we see this assessed value, and now we have our equalized value. So in order to figure out how to tax that, they do a process called apportionment, and I believe Sophia does that work for the county? Is that correct? Andrew? Does that work? So that is ultimately looking at the equalized value of each of the municipalities. And that will make up the total equalized value of the county. So then we figure out the portion that each municipality will pay of county taxes. So you can see this from a pie graph. This is actually using the 2023 numbers that are released. This is actual Dunn County numbers, real values. So you can see the city of Menominee is the big green section. The rest of the little pieces of the pie are all of the other villages and towns.
So sort of perhaps overstating the obvious, the total valuation for Dunn County is about $4.9 billion. And
I should point out that the total equalized value of Dunn County is a little bit greater than that. This number does not include the TID districts. They are excluded from that.
so the total at $4.9 billion. And then you can see that, the town of Colfax is $148 million. And that is 3% of that total. So just to kind of, again, overstating the obvious, but that's sort of how that works throughout all of the townships and villages and the city.
So we've now taken our $1 million and we broke it up into all of these little pieces that went off to the municipalities. Now that municipality has to look at their portion of that money and say, how do I hand this out? How do I essentially assess this tax to each of the property owners in my municipality? So this is a very small municipality. It's the town of Peru. They're actually a little bit bigger than the 7 fictional people that are here, but not much. So you can see I have I put in there some people, their assessed value. So once again, not their equalized value. Now we're starting to look at that assessed value because everyone in a municipality was assessed at the same time by the same assessor. So they are kind of on solid ground here in being equitable. So we're going to take that total amount that they're going to have to pay, and we're going to split that up based on their assessed value. And we'll flip that to the next page. So now we're going to calculate that. So we have $1 million that the county has, that the county is asking for. We look at that municipality. So now we're going to take the town of Peru, and we're going to say they have 0.468% of the total $1 million is the town of Peru's obligation. So we're going to do that math, 0.00466 times 1 million. And that's going to say that town of Peru has $4,667.81 that they need to tax their people. And now we're going to look at that assessed value in order to distribute that equitably amongst the residents of the town of Peru. In this case, the fictional people. And so you can kind of see how that breaks down then by that. So that's kind of how the equalized value and the assessed value work together as we kind of push that tax out. It isn't that we look at the full assessed value of everybody in Dunn County. We actually look at the equalized value in order to give it to the municipalities, and then the municipalities then break it up based on the assessed value. Moving on to the next.
Okay. Just making sure that we've
Yeah.
got some sign of light behind the eyes.
So why not just use the assessed value? So we kind of brought that up a little bit as you look at that might be the easiest calculation. Everybody's got an assessed value. What's the total assessed value of the county? Divide it all out and away we go. The problem is not everybody is assessed at the same time by the same person. So we're not going to be equitable in that particular way. So to Chris's point about an assessor not necessarily having any skin in the game here, if you did do it that way, if you did just go purely on assessed value, the assessor would have a lot more control over to say, I don't want to pay any taxes. I'm going to assess this really low and this one's going to get really high. But as you take equalized value and put it in there, it kind of levels out the game and takes a little bit of that control away from that assessor, because that is purely an evaluation of you versus your neighbor in the same municipality. This particular, I don't know if I call it a chart, is looking at each of the municipalities in Dunn County and when they were last, I shouldn't say when they were last evaluated, whether they are compliant. The way the process works is the state will look at the assessed values, and they kind of do their own math here, and based on sales and other factors that come in there, they determine whether a municipality is what percentage this municipality is out of sync essentially from where their assessed value versus where they believe that assessed value should be. If a municipality is greater than 10% out of whack, they get put on a list. And if that maintains for 5 years, they will receive, or 4 years, they will receive a notice that says you need to do a reevaluation. If that persists the next year, they get a second notification that they need to do an evaluation. If it goes to a 6th year, the Department of Revenue will do your reevaluation. So as you look at this chart, you can see the municipalities that are listed as compliant. Those are ones that are actually within scope, typically ones that have been reevaluated within like last year or within the last couple of years. The numbers there are then if you were out of whack, if you're greater than 10% out, that's how many years you have been out of that. So you can see we have 3 townships that are at 5 years. They very well could be going through reevaluation right now. This is based on 2022 information. We have a few of them that are out at 4. So those are areas that have for 4 years been greater than 10% out of essentially out of compliance. So think about those 4 years and what the housing markets looked like, right? Okay, so a lot of change. So that's where you're going to see major changes in assessed value in those particular areas. And if you were to look at that and say, why wouldn't we just use assessed values everywhere? If you live in one of those areas that hasn't been done in 4 years, your assessed value is way lower than somebody who was assessed this year. Well, actually, you probably would want that.
Will you use your Colfax?
Yeah.
City of Colfax or Village of Colfax?
Yeah,
and
so if you look at the Village of Colfax is compliant. They did a reval last year. The town of Colfax, as I learned very recently, is going through one right now. So you could potentially have a house in the Village of Colfax who has a neighbor in the town of Colfax who have the same house that are valued at $100,000 to $200,000 in difference right now. That's why equalized value exists and why the process goes that way. That is also to say, as you look at the assessment and as an assessment happens, everyone in that municipality is assessed at the same time. So if everybody's house is double, and we had this example before, if everyone's house is double, the amount they're taxed does not change. It's only the discrepancy between you and your neighbors within that same within that same municipality that can impact your taxes.
So remembering that assessed value sort of compares me and my neighbors loosely, and equalized value compares my municipality with other municipalities.
Bill rate. Uh, Lots of discussion. Mill rate. In general, the mill rate is, oh, I'm gonna have to read this one. The mill rate is the amount of tax payable per dollar of of assessed value. Mills are are an amount per $1,000 of assessed value. The rate is determined by who or what is taxing you. So ultimately, there is a mill rate for the county, there is a mill rate for the municipality, there's a mill rate for the school district, there's a mill rate for the tax district. And that is taking that value of that particular taxation district and dividing it by the amount that that tax district levied. And then you take off the $1,000 in value just in order to do that. And what that number represents is the amount of money per $1,000 of value. So if you had $1,000 valued house at a mill rate of 1, you pay $1 in tax for that $1,000. That's kind of what that mill rate is. So if I have a $2,000 house at a mill rate of 1, I am going to be taxed $2. That's kind of essentially what that mill rate is, but it all is a big calculation based on the total value of that taxation district and the levy that they apply. You will see on your tax bill, and we'll go over that again, there is a mill rate that you get on your tax bill, which is related to all of the taxes that you pay and how much your particular home is valued at. And that kind of will change around because that's all based on the multiple taxation districts that you are in. And I don't know, do you know how many taxation districts there are in the county? Lots. We're going with lots. So
Yes, if you think about living like me living in the city of Menominee, I'm getting taxed again by the city, by the county, by the city, by the school district, by the technical school district. That's it. I have 4. So if each of them are, if each of them need to levy $1 million, now we have to find $1 million divided by however much is the total equalized value for the city of Menominee. And that would give you the mill rate.
we have more than one town that in Dunn County that are in 4 or 5 or have 4 or 5 school districts within them. So
Supervisor Vogel.
So is it assessed value or equalized value? Because it looks like the calculations is equalized,
it's equalized.
but then
That's why I
above it says
hesitated.
1,000 of assessed. So
The mill rate's off the assessed. Well, see, this is where we have their confusion between. Okay, so we're gonna go with what the assessor says.
Right.
Just to clarify that, the final mill rate on your tax bill is off the
Yes.
assessed value.
Yes.
Well, off your assessed value, right? It's like it does this,
But
it does this. So the mill rate is set by the
By the
total
equalized.
tax levy divided by the total equalized value in your municipality.
Yes, okay.
And then the mill rate gets multiplied by your assessed value to give you your tax rate. If that's really confusing, it is really confusing, but so it kind of does this like twist around, but so first the municipality has to say, how much tax do we need?
That's
Then how much is our total value? That's going to give us a rate that we're going to tax every property owner based on the assessed value of their property. Okay, so this is my house. This is just an example of all of those things in place. So this all started with, and thank you to Dan, thank you to Sophia, who've just really helped to kind of pull data and to look at all of this sort of stuff. But I was like, as we were talking about taxes and Dunn County, and I'm like, well, I am like really sure my taxes rate has gone down. I'm not sure why it looks so funky, but why this is all stretched out of confusion, but oops, sorry. Let me see if I can just get it back to why it's this. Should be able to move this. Why does it look so, well, it doesn't matter. You'll get the point when I go back. So somehow the bottom moved on us. So we pulled, Sophia pulled. So in 2012, my assessed value of my home at 525 Oak Park Circle, I guess I just said it to a public meeting, anyone who wants to come. Assessed value was $160,200. And then it shows the mill rate for the city of Menominee. In that, and again, that's a compilation of the county, the city, the township, or the county, the city, the school district, and the technical college. And then my total tax amount then was $3,600. And if I could get you to the bottom in some expedient fashion, you would see that that my assessed value in 2022 was $184,600. And my tax rate was about $3,200. So my taxes actually fell over that 10-year period. And you can see that the assessed value rose. You can't see it because I can't get you there, but the assessed value rose and the tax amount came down. That is not universal. So this is just a smattering of properties in Dunn County, and kind of for you to get a look at, because it's kind of fascinating. So top one, same city of Menominee, over a little bit, a mile to the west of me, same mill rates, assessed value rose between those in that 10-year period. Assessed value rose at about $80,000, and the tax rate, their taxes went up $490 over that same 10-year period. Some property in the town of New Haven, same thing. Value of the property rose from $66,000 to $100,000, and their taxes went up $749 over that 10-year period. Village of Boyceville, you can see kind of that particular property. Assessed value went up 50-ish thousand, 45,000. Property taxes went up $412. Town of Rock Creek, looked at another one. You can see that difference. Then we get into city of Menominee. Oh, we're back in the town. Sorry, we're in the town of Menominee. Now we are in the town of Menominee, right across the town line, or right across the city line. We are out on Ingalls, either Ingalls or just I think it's just farther down Ingalls Road. It's either Ingalls or River Heights, or one of those that crosses over into the town of Menominee. In that particular township, so essentially, if you said to the person where do they live, they'd say I live in Menominee, because they appear to be in the city, but they're outside of the city limits. Their house went from 342,000 to 326,000 over a 10-year period, and their taxes have dropped $1,131 over that same time period. Village of Knapp, this was somebody who was like, who do I know who's like lived in their house for forever and probably never put $1 into it? So I looked up someone I knew who lived in Knapp, dear little old friend of mine. And in 2012, their house was worth $56,000, and in 2022, it's worth $62,000, and their taxes went down a little bit. And then this is one of them, and Randy pointed this out to me when I was, he was also of great help in running through all of this. This is one of them where you can really see where the reevaluation can look crazy. So in 2012, this was a home in the town of Sherman for $258,000. In 2021, it was $243,000, and after the reassessment, $399,000. So that house, essentially the assessed value rose $150,000 in a year, but their taxes have gone down. Because it rose less quickly. Am I saying this right? Rose less quickly than other houses.
We both raised the same day, but.
Yeah. But I mean, like, what, less
Yeah.
difference.
Yep. Yep.
So,
And I think a lot of that is just to point out a lot of the confusion that just happens with an assessment of my assessed value went up, so my taxes are going up, or the county wants more money.
and to ultimately, this all started with trying to address, how could we potentially predict what would happen based on whether we borrowed money and our levy went up, or our levy went, our levy stayed the same, or our levy went up for the county, because taxes borrowing is not restricted by levy limits. What could happen? And so we get to the key takeaway. A resident's tax bill is impacted by a number of things: the county's levy, the municipality's levy, the school district's levy, the technical college district's levy, and any special district's levy. It's impacted by the resident's assessed value of their home, and by the municipality's equalized value as determined by the Department of Revenue. The only item in the tax bill which the county controls is the county's levy. Any increase or decrease in the levy will not necessarily result in a corresponding change to an individual's tax bill. And there is no easy way to predict the impact of a levy increase on an individual taxpayer. The best indicator would be increases or decreases in the mill rate.
So one of the things that we had talked about as we went through that is, if it was only the county that you got their tax bill from, and we increased the levy, and there was no assessments done, and the equalized value did not change, everyone would see an increase in their taxes. That's never going to happen. So that is to say, raising the levy will impact taxes. But on an individual basis, it is hard to say this is because of this. Or it could be because you had an assessment done. It could be because another village had an assessment, or the equalized value in another village had changed. And so the distribution of taxes from municipality to municipality was different. So the impact on an individual taxpayer isn't quite as simple as that. And that's to say that the mill rate is a better factor to help you understand what is the impact to taxes as the levy changes. So this graph is looking at a few items here. Is looking at the mill rate for Dunn County. So this is the equalized value of Dunn County. So that essentially that $4.9 million number that we had looked at before, or $1 billion number. In order to make this all work on a chart here, I divided it by 100 so that it looks like $40 million. It's actually 4 billion. So just that yellow, that's the yellow line. Just kind of add 2 zeros in order to get the real number for that. But that was so that the chart would be usable. And then if you then divide the levy with that equalized value, that's kind of where we're looking at that mill rate value. That is, I have the number set on that, but if you can look in there, in 2016, that number was at about $7 per thousand. And it is down to about $4 per $4.78 per $1,000. So you can see that the tax burden, or that mill rate for the county levy, has gone down at a pretty significant rate over the last, how many years is that?
5, 7, 6.
And then the yellow value is the is the equalized value. So you can see that the value of real estate is going up dramatically. I don't know if that was a surprise to anybody. The other two lines that are there, the gray line is our, I like to just call it the limited levy. So that is the levy without the debt service in it.
That's our true
So-
levy cap.
Yeah, so that's that's the gray line is the capped one. The blue one is the actual levy that includes the payment that, the debt service payment. And the other things in there that with the bridge petitions and the libraries are also kind of, I guess, kind of packed into that difference there, but it's a negligible number. So that's to really kind of show that the burden to the taxpayers' taxes. If you look at the mill rate, the amount of money you pay per $1,000 of property that you own has actually gone down at a pretty rapid rate over the last 7 years. Now, does that mean that somebody's tax bill, the amount of money that they paid at the for taxes that year went down? No, it doesn't. But the percentage that they paid based on the value of their home has gone down. Sorry.
So this is just,
Equalized value. Of their
this
home.
is just a, this is just, you've all seen them. This happens just to be from one that I swiped from online. So, but just basically showing you that your tax statement contains all of this information. Your total assessed value up here at the top, your total equalized fair market value. This is the mill rate here, over here. This is your total tax obligation. And then these are the taxing districts that are taken into consideration. In this particular case, Milwaukee County, City of Wauwatosa, Wauwatosa School District, Milwaukee Area Technical College, the Metro Sewer District. That's it, I guess. So, yep, and a sales tax. So you have all of those pieces available to you on your tax bill. And then I'm going to ignore this, but I'm going to pull this up just because I love this slide because Sophia did it for me. And because this was one of the things that this was going to be the takeaway. So ignore that. Just look at so this is, Sophia found me 3 properties in Dunn County, all assessed at the same value in 2022 at $185,000. And then it shows you the assessment ratio. So how close is the assessed value to the fair market value? And so the smaller the number, the wider that gap. And you can see that reflected. $185,000 assessed value, fair market value $181,000. Assessed value $185,000. In the city of Menominee, fair market value $210,000. So the lower the assessment ratio, the lower the more the divide between the fair market value and assessed value. Then the mill rate and the tax amount. So these are 3 people in Dunn County, real live people somewhere in Dunn County. Only Sophia knows who they are, and who have homes assessed at exactly the same amount and are paying over $1,000 different in property taxes. Any questions? So as much information that is, and I know that, and I'm kind of, like I say, started the standpoint that Dan and I both have to figure something out, but it just feels like it's a really helpful thing to understand the intricacies of that as we start to talk about mill rates and borrowing and using fund balances and all those sorts of things, to have a background of the difficulty in predicting how that will play itself out for any individual taxpayer in Dunn County. And with that, I think that I am finally ready to be quiet, except that I did set an option for you either to provide input and or under number 6 to make any recommendations that you'd like to make at this point in time, given all the things that you've heard with regard to us formulating the next round of budget to presentation to, or information to bring to you in October.
Supervisor Kinnear.
New position requests, if we don't talk about them right now, we're just assuming that we accept them.
You have from now until October to, I mean, you could do it now or you could do it in October. I'd prefer you did it now if you were ready to do that. But we really, I mean, we can keep changing things up until October. After the October county board meeting is when we need to go to publication with our budget. So our numbers need to be finalized by that time. But the more lead that we have, if you have recommendations of things that you'd like to change based on what you know today, it would be helpful to know those things now.
Just one minute. We've heard from the department chairs, but I'd like to have a discussion on each one at the executive committee. Go through and say yes or no. What the rest of you think?
Chris, and then Supervisor Morehouse. Okay, Supervisor Morehouse.
Supervisor Kinnear sort of obviated this because he wants to talk about the new position request, and I guess I'm okay with that. But I was just doing some sort of not great math. So if we are at $6.4 million shortfall, call it, you said 6.3 today. And acting under the assumption that we agree to utilizing 10% of fund balance. Yeah. That's 1.7 about. Yeah.
If you drop your fund balance, if you implement a fund balance policy
Right.
and or agree to drop your ratio from 60% to 50%, it's about $2.5 million.
Okay. I was sort of figuring that it was a 10% and it would be, anyway, 1.7 is what I did in my stupid math, which drops the proposed deficit to 4.7. If we assume that the differential between wages and hires and all of that, whatever we call that, can be covered, that's 2.2 million. That leaves us with $2.5 million that we have to adjust. Am I right? In the budget.
The salary.
About.
The salary and new position requests as they currently exist are just about 2 million, almost exactly $2 million.
I'm pulling these numbers from old documents, obviously, but that's where we sit about. Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Would you like me to find the list of new positions?
Well, if I'm the only one, no, it wouldn't make any sense. Oh. Yeah, it'd be nice to talk about them.
Okay, give me 2 seconds.
And as you're pulling up, Mr. Chair, may I?
Certainly.
I know that you mentioned that the wage variance will cover things. But as you add positions year after year that are permanent and stay there, it won't continue to cover things.
So that's a great question. And I'll just tell you what I know about that. So we calculated that a little bit, and we know that we can do this year to do that. We know that but we know that next year is its own year. I mean, you basically are doing it on a year by year basis. What I would say is that if you look at the county's budget from say 10 years ago, and you look at the county's budget to today, all those numbers would be all greater, and we're still doing it, and our levy has essentially stayed the same. So somehow in all of that math, now I'm not talking about like that we've done some borrowing and we've built some things. And so there's some of that factors in, but if you go back to that last slide that Dan emphasized, showed, you know, we have done what we've done and I'll just say it perhaps in not a great way, but we've grown government without it costing additional tax levy.
It's probably worth noting in terms of thinking about the wage variance over the next couple of years that Jenna ran us those numbers showing that we're going to have about a third of the county employees turnover, which is going to affect that a lot. And so is the incredibly tight market for labor. Now that we don't know how long that's going to last, but I would expect the wage variance to be pretty big for a couple more years. Just looking at, because the wage variance is partially it's not being able to fill positions, partially it's replacing very senior staff people with very new. So I think, again, we can't know that that'll be the case, but I think that that's a not entirely unreasonable assumption in the
Right.
1 to 3
We
years.
built a sustainable way to sustain the wage increase as it would exist for this year going forward. It does not factor in any future wage increases.
Okay, I get that part, but eventually the people you hire now move up the wage scale. If you keep adding positions, I'm not saying we need to not add any of these, but one thing to consider, when you add a position this year, that's permanent, that's forever. So I think that's one of the reasons I want to look at them. We didn't look at them last year. We just said, okay. But it will not continue to cover it if you add too many.
Oh,
I'll put it that way. There is a point where if you add the positions, you can't cover it.
Yeah, it's not here anymore. I'm struggling a little bit
But
with just finding
mathematically,
it.
that has to be the case.
If you don't eliminate other positions along the way, which is something that we've certainly, I mean, there have been positions that haven't been filled and are never going to be filled again. There have been positions that we've had in the past where we've eliminated that category. There have been any number of times where we have, as a county, reduced the number of positions, not usually by firing people, but often by not rehiring or eliminating a position where someone has left.
And that's part of the wage variance.
Yeah, but I'm just, it's not, we're not just constantly adding positions without
I
removing.
recognize that, but I'd like the group to know that there is a point where mathematically you cannot cover it.
Absolutely, if you don't also eliminate positions.
Well, you can eliminate them, but then you could add even more. There is a point where you can't add. I don't care if you eliminate other ones.
Well,
Look
no,
at the
if
net
you
number,
add 100 and you drop 100,
but look at the net number. That's what you can look at. If you add 100 and you drop 90, you're adding 10.
She's got a list.
I am in complete agreement with that point. What I'm just saying is, when we talk about adding positions, we need to remember that we have also been removing positions. So that is part of the calculation. So, I mean, we could, if you can go the other way too, if we add 90 positions and get rid of 100, eventually we have no employees.
Are we cutting positions this year?
I don't know. And I'm not arguing.
Well, they have been unfilled. I know we haven't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we need to make those decisions. It's just,
Okay, so we could say, oh, we've got some unfilled positions in the environmental services. Let's fill one of them. We could suggest that now if we wanted to. If we're just that's just
Well,
theoretically.
Well, of course we could, but we're the policymakers and not the staff. I mean, the staff hasn't recommended from environmental services, hasn't recommended to fill those 2 positions. That's not our job. I think.
Theoretically was my point. We could.
Theoretically.
Okay. Yeah. So that's what we're talking about right now. So I think it's important to look at the positions and not just blindly say, yes, they're all okay, like we did last year. Thank you.
I'd agree with Mike. You got to look at each one individually.
oh, absolutely. I don't argue against looking at positions. I'm just noting that the math goes both ways.
I agree.
Okay.
But if we could save that money someplace else, it goes someplace else.
Oh,
into
yeah,
the fund.
definitely.
It just helps balance everything else out.
So this gets you your list. So, so if you want to just start at the top, there are these first two positions here, and you have to refer to your lists to say, because there's some updated numbers about what these actually cost based what was on here, because they've changed around a little bit. We've tried to trim them wherever we could, but the first two positions are Beata's transitioning, 2 existing staff to 2 management positions, one that would oversee highway, primary lead for highway, and the other that would be a primary lead for the Department of Human Services. And that, those at the point of this time were about $18,000 difference. They might be different. I don't have a copy of what she provided to you guys today in the green, the red and the green sheets, but. Thoughts about those?
Reciproc now?
Is this gonna be like a free thing or what are we doing? Those are existing staff, right? It's just an
Yeah.
upgrade in the staff position, right?
Yes.
Promotions, right?
Okay, okay.
In a sense. These are promotions,
The
basically. in a sense.
promotions, yep,
Thank
yep,
you.
yep.
I mean, I think we're gonna have if we're gonna get through this in, say the next 9 hours, we're gonna have a pretty free flowing.
That's what I mean.
Quick
So if
discussion,
you
yeah.
call me, I mean,
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying. I just was wondering.
Yep.
Yeah. I had a recommendation, I don't know if it was possible. I mentioned it to Chris. Possibility of promoting one of the current staff to a jail sergeant from maybe, full-time day shift experienced jailer. And then, backfilling that with a new hire. That saves a whole lot, but otherwise, where are we gonna come up with this jail sergeant from? A new hire?
No, we would promote somebody already employed and then backfill with a new hire.
Okay, thank you. Perfect. Yeah, I guess addressing the sheriff's department, my thought would be that adding that jailer is important because our chance of liability, county's liability is pretty great there. We'd want to limit the opportunity for that to happen. To me, it just makes good sense. I don't know that I would support the other position, but I definitely would support the jail position.
Okay, so in the interests of moving this along, people jump in when we get,
That's what I was gonna say.
and then I'll just like thumbs up, thumbs down generally for.
I would say the same thing. I mean, we gotta cut a couple positions and like I say, there's 2 positions there. The jail one seems pretty important. The other one. We need to cut one. I would definitely cut the patrolman one.
And the sheriff's department did add a full position last year.
Mhm.
So while I would question both of them, I could go along with one, the
I'd question both.
the jail, but hear from somebody else.
My thought is we went 20 years without a jail sergeant. That's a long time. So our liability for 20 years has been out there. I don't know if that makes any difference, but just a thought.
Yeah, if we have to cut positions, I would opt for the jail position. I think that we're not in the business of compensating for youthful staff in the sheriff's department. I don't. And the DNR position is partly paid for from outside. So we have to cut them and that's the one I take.
I'm just concerned about the recreational one. Just things change. People retire and it has happened in the past where, not with this sheriff, certainly, where a position was named and then later used differently. which is their prerogative.
Mhm.
But they did add a staff last year. Do they need to add a staff this year? What, Mr. Steen, what, you were, you want one?
Well, yeah, and I still say, and I think the argument for the guy to work in the jail so we have adequate supervision, we don't want to open it. And I understand maybe we ain't been sued in 20 years, but things change. And to me, we would not want to have the opportunity for that to happen. Because if we did get sued and all we have is a supervisor on call, I don't think that answers answers our liability. So that's where I'm coming from. And I would support that jailer, but I would not support the other position.
I'm gonna just note for context in the historical record, we have had a lawsuit over issues at the jail in the past. We won the lawsuit, but it would have been a very significant liability to the county. So it is not the case that there have not been incidents. There actually have been.
Hey, while you ponder that, can I go back to the, because I mentioned this last time that we met. So there was initially my request for funding for an assistant county manager position, which estimated out at about $140,000. And I mentioned at the workshop and stand by that if there was support to do that, I would look to reduce that request to $25,000. And that would be essentially designated money to be able to move some kind of assistant county manager responsibilities to an existing department head. So essentially it'd be like, I think I mentioned, like, let's say it was like Greg Quinn. Greg Quinn would be the Veteran Services Officer / Assistant County Manager, that he could fulfill that role in addition to his existing role. And the 25,000 would be for additional compensation for the person who took on those additional responsibilities, and a little bit of money to be able to backfill some of the staffing in an existing office that would allow that person to free up a little bit of their time. I'm thinking it's roughly, in my mind, it's like roughly a quarter of someone's time. So that's where that stands. So that request would drop then from 141 to 25.
I'd be more on board with that. That's a no-brainer.
So is that generally a thumbs up on that one?
Thumbs up.
Thumbs up if it does, if it helps Chris. I mean, if it actually does do what you.
Well, I would just use it as an example. So in his existing role, Dan Dunbar has taken on the broadband work. And it's been a substantial time commitment. So it'd be like things like that I have not had to land on my plate. And he had the capacity to do that within his existing role, but certainly there are more things to be done. And there may well be other individuals as well, or another individual who, we can carve capacity or whatever that looks like going forward.
That looks like a broad thumbs up.
Yeah.
Next.
So if we can go back to so you have a number of, I'll just quantify these, some existing position changes. So you have those 2 persons in the finance department. You have Greg Quinn's request from Veteran Services to add additional time to his one program assistant position. And you have the change in the county clerk's office to add some hours to a part-time county clerk position. So those particular positions, at least the county clerk and the veterans, I think what I would ask you to keep in mind is that those offices have 2 staff. So there's literally no backup. If, I said, if Andrew breaks his ankle or wins the lottery or something in between and needs to be out, we essentially have one person in that office. Greg has a little bit different. He does have a full-time assistant position in this other one, but it's 8 hours a week. And so this would move that to half-time, roughly half-time. Same thing with Andrew's position. So there's those two, and I think those are the only existing ones.
If I may,
Mhm.
the Veterans Service Office with the passage of the Federal PACT Act has had just this exponential increase in phone calls and visits. And this is, I think, a no-brainer.
I agree too. I actually with both of those, with the county clerk, but the veteran service offices, they're doing other things besides, they've got the lending closet and it's just like crazy.
Same here. I think, especially the veterans, I mean, that's huge right now. Clerk too, I mean, that's kind of positive on both of them.
And, okay.
And
Looks
the
up.
added two positions?
Yeah.
Okay, so your existing positions, and I'm going shopping. The existing position ones then would change or would stay. Change the assistant county manager one. So Jenna in HR has a position request, but it has no levy. It has no additional cost. What we would look to do is to utilize some money from our self-insurance fund to fund that position so we can continue to, as well as bill out some of it. The city of Menominee has agreed to fund part of that position as well. So do you want to talk more about that, whether you wish to add that position or not, given that it wouldn't result in any additional?
Anybody want to address that? Vaughn?
Yeah,
Oh,
I would,
your microphone's not on. There you go.
yeah, I would go with that position. I think that, we're, and if down the road something changes, that could change, but right now, with the hiring and all the things that they've taken on to do that haven't been part of the personnel department before, I think this position could be invaluable and keep everything in line. So I would say a thumbs up to that.
So thumbs up, thumbs down. Anyone have a?
I
Yes?
just, yeah.
Okay. There's another one.
Okay, two human services positions. You heard Director Winter speak to those earlier this evening, one for a lead behavioral health person and who would absorb some of that workload, do some staff clinical supervision, and then a licensed therapist, and then the lead would be on the adult protective services side.
Let me just say on the, if I may, sorry,
Please.
sorry about that.
No, go.
On the adult protective services, I mean, we certainly heard what's happening with us old folks. And the increase in demand here, it's ridiculous to try to pass that work off to existing staff. So I am supportive of both positions. I think they're both extremely necessary, but that one is, I think, particularly critical.
A question, and I know you might even have a handle on it. My suggestion was, do we have anybody on staff that could take that lead position? As the population is moving that way and less children in smaller families. I don't, there's a lot of people working in that department. Or isn't there? That's my question.
I certainly let Paula speak to that, but no. I mean, there's not a lot of fat there. But I don't think we've seen less demand in family and children's services. In fact, I think the converse of that is quite true. So, I mean, I don't know about an internal move, but there still is a vacant position. So.
I guess I would support both positions. I think the workload's increased dramatically. And it's part of what we offer. And I think what's happened over the years, like I've been on the Human Services Committee since I got back on the board, and I was also on in the 80s. And this might be throughout the county, but I think we've taken a lot of fat, if there was fat, out of our personnel. And so for my 2 cents, I think we've reached a point where we don't have people cross-trained to take people's jobs in case somebody gets sick, because we don't have the ability to do that. So that puts us at risk. Whereas in the past, we did have the capacity to have people trained to take over for people if something happened. And so that's why I'm in favor of this. And additionally, and I'll speak, the Human Service Department is a really complex department, and the intertwining or the interaction of the reimbursement from the state and the federal government is hard to understand. And it's easy to say, let's take 200 grand out of the human services. But in essence, because of the interpayment and the interaction, you might be taking 350 grand out. You know what I'm saying? You're saving the county 200 grand, but you're cutting your throat by another 150 because you'd get it from the federal government. So and for that reason, I think this whole process is tough, because everything the county does, every request that we got here, we do good stuff. And I don't mean we, but I mean the people that work for us. And so, and I've had this discussion before, and some people agree and some don't, but the county level of government is nothing but the service. We don't make any money. We offer a service to our people. And so what we're trying to do here is everybody's opinion of what service level should we have. I'm hopeful that my reasoning makes sense to some people. And I realize that if I have enough horsepower, it'll go my way. And if I don't, it won't. But I'll still love you. You know what I mean? But I feel that, and this is on a broader area that we're, because there's never enough money on any level of government to do the things the way you should do. But what service are you willing to advocate for, and what service are you willing to go home and talk to your taxpayers about and tell them the reason why you voted a certain way? I myself do not mind doing that. I try to be rational in what I'm doing. I try to have good ideas to back up my votes, and hopefully the people can understand that. And my experience on the board in the 80s and now is that everybody that I've worked with wants the same thing, the best for the county. How we get there, of course, is a different situation. But and I'm not running for office, so I'll shut up.
Can I just point out real quickly, something that's missed in this conversation about these two positions, the adult protective services position, that program lead position, there is not a lot of additional funding for that position. That would be about a $97,000 at this point in time, it was about a $97,000 ask. On the lead therapist position, there is a revenue once that person's up and situated and doing their work. There is a revenue stream to fund that. Total cost of the position, $104,000, anticipated revenue, $88,000. So the actual new funding ask is about $15,000 on that second position. And let me just really quickly explain it at the risk of confusing you, but there's a little bit of interplay between this decreased revenue number and these new positions. This decreased revenue number is really hard to quantify because, for instance, in the Department of Human Services, there was a $600,000-ish decrease in revenue from CBDG grants. There's also a $600,000 decrease in expense. So it's really hard to quantify this decreased revenue. This $623,000 that's captured here does not necessarily include, it's close to what it actually costs. Actually, it might be what it actually costs to add the new positions with the revenue, but it's not like you can look at those new positions and they're all gonna add up to $623,000 because there is some revenue to offset those. So the DHS ask would be more like, looks like 110-ish, $112,000 versus 200, whatever, if that makes sense.
If I may, that second position, it's just the sort of the vagaries of reimbursement. It gets reimbursed in a later period, gets reimbursed in a later year. It's crazy. And I don't think we need to go into deep detail about how human services gets reimbursed, but.
Randy?
Like I said, both positions are, I'm sure, well needed. I mean, it's just no doubt about that. I just have a hard time approving two positions for one entity, I guess, but I guess they can't split their time 50-50 either, so I don't know, but I can't support two positions, so
Which one you?
I don't know. That's why I said that would be up to whoever's more important, I guess.
Well, it looks like it's about 1.25 positions effectively in cost to the county. Anyone else want to throw anything in?
Can I just throw one other thing in that because this is a new collection of executive committee, you might not have been through a budget process before. There are other considerations that you can make, and some of them can be delaying implementation of a new position until mid-year, which saves some costs. It doesn't save, to Supervisor Kinnear's thoughts, it doesn't save in the following years, but it does save in terms of your investment in the coming year. So if you add a position mid-year, it's about half of what it's allocated to be for the whole year.
Yeah, I would support both positions, but I would certainly support what Chris is saying with regard to the I think the first is the most expensive position, the
elder
program
care.
lead position, yeah. But the therapy position, I totally support, especially with as Chris pointed out, with the offsetting revenue. And this could be a long-term program that can pretty much pay for itself mostly. But this is a really, I think, a strong need in this county. The therapy services are just not available to people. And the opportunity to provide this for this population at this public expense is really an opportunity we shouldn't pass up.
And I'll just jump in. I think that, delaying this, it might naturally, either the positions might naturally be delayed because you have to find someone to hire for them, and looking at like the qualifications for the positions and what, like, for example, even like the master degree therapist, I'm looking at what the county is going to potentially pay that person and what that person could probably make in private practice with the need. Boy, we could approve this and we might be looking for that position for years for that person.
I have to agree with with Supervisor Quinn, because I look at these as preventative measures. Rather than getting to the sheriff or whatever, juvenile or the courts, these can help us prevent things in the future. And I don't care if it's delayed a half a year or do it, bite the bullet all at once, but I think they're important.
Sounds like a loose consensus for both.
Looks like
Oh,
you're
yeah.
your two sheriff's department positions.
I sympathize, Randy, but I think you're,
I don't,
Yeah.
I agree with that. They're both needed. I'm not arguing that.
I just didn't want you to feel left out of that a loose consensus statement.
I just want you to realize that you are channeling Mike Rogers for the executive committee. So I just,
Which I appreciate.
we do, yeah, all of this.
Okay. That,
Sheriff's Department, did you come to a consensus about that?
No.
let's split those. Sergeant. The supervising sergeant. Yeah, jail, thumbs up. I guess I'm a tiebreaker on that one. I lean towards it, having seen the lawsuit.
Wasn't another county just had, I just read the news, it was a Wisconsin county too, if I recall, had a serious thing.
Just that's
Thing.
With, it was an overnight jail situation, so I can't remember what the article was about it, but it was bad.
So I think that's leave that one in for now, but we'll come back to it in October and that might get revisited. The other one. The recreational. Anybody?
I'm the only one.
I mean, I see the need for it. I mean, cause I live on Tainer Lake. I see what happens with the lack of patrols, but and I know it's come up for a request a couple of times here, and but I can, if things are getting set aside, I can say thumbs down, but I do know that I see that more and more, and also with the spread of the UTVs and the people on the roads, that's gonna, at some point, we're probably gonna have to do this. Whether it's for this coming budget year or not, it's gonna be a necessary thing.
So I'm seeing that as a loose consensus for no.
Yeah, I guess I would like to offer this. I think it's probably necessary. Maybe it's one thing we could consider pushing off to a later date to hire. And I see it too. If you want to see a racetrack, come to Boyceville on the weekend and watch the UTVs and ATVs. 10-mile-an-hour posted speed limit. How fast can I come around the corner past Headland's house and get over to the Senex station? And how much can I leave my buddies in the dust? And it's just, I mean, it's not 10, it's 50. And and there's nobody, well, it's a DNR thing. It's it's a this thing, it's a that thing. You know, if any officers want to step up, do anything about it. It's out of control already, and we just passed the ordinance to let them do it.
Like Randy said, everything's important. I look at the $75,000 vehicle that goes along with this position and the maintenance of that going forward too. So maybe if it's important enough, we can look at it next year.
That looks like a loose no.
Highway engineering technician.
Well, part of that is gonna be used by wage increase would be used by so we don't have to hire stuff out. I think we're the only department that has lost over 30 employees after the last 10 years, but I can say half his salary would probably be paid by not having outside services paid, but so I'd say yes.
What was your comment about losing employees?
Well, now, how many years ago was it? We had 80 employees. Now we have like 50. So I mean,
I think it was around 70 when I started on the board.
yeah, we had quite a few employees back in the day. Which, I mean, the efficiencies have always been improved. So I mean, but
Well, going way back to when I started working at Uniroyal, I could have worked there or worked for the county. That would have been 1969 or 68. I think the county had 127 employees then. And I don't see that that the number of roads we take care of has decreased. So just think about that. The equipment's better and they're doing a better job, but when that's a hell of a decrease, just a bit of history, I guess.
Coming
Yeah,
from someone who knows.
I think you know, the points were made about the amount of paperwork and permitting and just, I think this project this project is gonna in part help with the workload on that, on those things, I think, right? Am I wrong about that? So I'd support it.
I also, I go back to the budget workshop and looked at that comparison to other counties. With the help that the people have at the top, and there's some big projects coming up for this county, and we don't want to lose our top dude.
That sounds like a loose consensus for yes.
Yeah.
Oh, that's actually pretty, sounds like a solid consensus for yes. Okay.
All right. Oh, I'm sorry. I
EDA.
didn't go far enough down my list. So it looks like we have two left that are existing position changes. So one is in the treasurer's office. Two administrative clerk part-time positions that would be changed to deputy treasurer positions. Okay, looking at Sophia for confirmation to the tune of $14,000.
Needed.
Okay.
All right, and then you have a district attorney's office as well. Existing staff request increase two existing part-time victim witness positions from part-time to full-time to $60,000 to do that.
I don't know, important to keep our part-time people. If they want to go full-time, I agree with the move up on those.
Yeah, we added a third judge. If I may,
Yes, John.
hey, everybody.
Forgot about him back there.
I've been listening along. I know that District Attorney Nodoff has talked about the rising caseload due to a extra justice that we have, and so I would be in full support of those. And just to weigh in on the sheriff's department, I feel like, given this discussion, I've been a little bit remiss in delving deeper into the jail sergeant discussion, and I think between now and October I need to look more into that, because I am concerned about the liability, of course, but we haven't had one in so long, and so I want to learn more about that incident that Supervisor Zahns mentioned. I know that, I'm assuming that there are cameras everywhere in there, and if there is some statute attached to not having an official supervisor that brings about liability, or if it just has to do with the incident. And so I think pending a little bit more information on that jail sergeant, I'm still up in the air about whether, if I had to choose about one or the other with the sheriff's department, I'm leaning towards keeping the recreational officer one, since it was proposed last year as well, and the sheriff's department rescinded that proposal to help with our budget negotiations. And like Supervisor Headland said, it seems like it's very important, but I guess I'm just saying I'm still not sure and need to do a little bit more research.
Thank you. So district attorney,
Mm-hmm.
that looks like a yes.
Yeah.
Okay, we will rerun numbers for you well, you'll probably get an update for September, maybe for September County Board meeting. We'll get you an update for September County Board meeting on kind of where things are all at with those changes.
Mr. Chair, can I just thank people for having patience? But I think it also enabled us to discuss them a little bit and understand a little bit better and see what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Okay. Are we on to item 6?
I believe so.
Yeah, I know. All right, reports, resolutions, and ordinances of the county board from the executive committee. Review and recommendation of draft FY 2024 Dunn County budget, which is what we've just been doing. Do we need more on that?
Not from my perspective.
Okay. B, ordinance amending chapter 7 of the Code of Ordinances, creating fiscal policy, second reading. Anybody feel a need to talk about that? Supervisor Steen.
Yeah, are we tying ourselves down for the future by having a set policy?
No, any future board can change it if they want to.
So what would be the point of this?
Well, it's the same point in, anytime you set policy, that our job is to set policy, help help staff sort out which policies to go on. It gives us a guideline. It's just half of the job of policy and oversight.
Okay, so if we have a fiscal policy, would that be, would part of it being, what percentage would we be willing to sustain as debt?
No.
Oh, this is purely the fund balance.
The fund balance.
And that's also, isn't that the recommendation to have a certain percentage there?
Yeah, it was, this was talking about setting it to 50%.
Okay, and so that's what we would be,
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll have a significant, it's not like we're making this, we're just touching base again. It's at the county board. I'm sure we will have a significant discussion of it at the board level.
thank you for your patience.
No worries. It's not patience, it's just, we gotta do the job. Okay, anybody else on that? All right, C, 2023 budget adjustments. DHS, Health Department, Sheriff's Department, Administration, CJCC. The whole pile. I need a motion for this one.
I so move.
Supervisor Steen, Supervisor Zons. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that's a whole nother number off the list. 7. Review of reports, resolutions, and ordinances coming to the county board from the standing committees. Planning, resources, and development. Tom, you wanna?
Yeah, so we have two, I think, right?
Yep.
And one is a simple, straightforward rezone, which was approved by the town also, so we'll bring that forward. And then second reading of the revision of the zoning code to delineate, to clarify, well, to eliminate one of the elements of the code that was adopted and turns out to be a bit of a problem for the towns. And that is to include in the commercial zoning classification, the right to do multiple family non-owner occupied housing. And the committee, after long discussion, we can have a brief clarification of this for the board, but decided that it was advisable to remove that type of housing as a by right designation in the commercial zoning district. So that's what we're proposing, and that's what we're asking the county to endorse.
Okay. Community resources and tourism. Broadband task force.
This is kind of an offshoot of the task force that we had that studied broadband. It's kind of an implementation of some grant stuff that's coming up. So it's kind of to create a new formal committee, which we're going to call the broadband task force, that will be comprised of county board supervisor, the chair of the CRNT committee, which happens to be me, but it would be anybody would be on that. But then it will also be representative stakeholders that can help kind of manage some of the potential grants that are coming out to act a little bit quickly. And if Dan is still here, is there anything that any better way to describe some of what the task force might be doing other than what I've said? I know you weren't paying attention. I saw you on your phone, so. So you can read a little bit more about how it's put together. But it will basically, it will answer to the board, but also report back to the CRNT committee, which has basically it control or has dominion over broadband.
Okay. Facilities.
So the ordinance regulating hours and use of county parks. We haven't had an ordinance about camping in the parks. And so this gives the sheriff and a little bit of power, or I think we have a ticket amount in there if someone camps overnight in any of the parks. So if someone decides to put their camper there for a week, this gives us some
Control.
Mhm.
And that's 7. On to reports from the standing committees. Supervisor Moore, actually, I'm gonna start with John because he keeps getting forgotten. Supervisor Calabrese.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, it's hard to remember the person on the screen. I get it. But I have been able to, sneak away and use the bathroom and get some drinks. And not to make you all jealous. But yes, we had our meeting in late August, and I don't have the date in front of me, but all the departments presented their budget proposals to the Judiciary and Law Committee, and gave some details about the highlights of requests and major changes, and all were approved without discussion. The Sheriff's Department was the last one. There was some discussion there about the cameras that that Marshall talked about earlier today in this meeting, and questions about privacy concerns and where the data will be stored, and taking pictures of every car and vehicle that comes through those camera points, and the sheriff explained that a little bit more. And so eventually everyone got approved, and again, being unprepared, the next meeting will be the last Monday of September in the room that you're in now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Health and Human Services Board last met on August 24th. We had a report from the Behavioral Services Manager about the children's long-term waiver. That was great. We reviewed in detail budgets from all 3 of our departments, approved them. We did our normal stuff. We noted review of the DHS vouchers. We approved budget adjustments for human services and for public health. And our next meeting is September 28th.
Thank you, Supervisor Morehouse. Supervisor Kinnear.
Carmen covered everything better than I ever could. And our next meeting is 9/28.
Thank you, Supervisor Kinnear. Supervisor Zons.
And if our county manager can enable screen sharing for me, CRNT committee actually met yesterday, got an update from Extension and a long report from Zach, who's the 4-H director, and he did he's done some fabulous stuff since being in that role, I think less than a year at this point. So it's was interesting to hear that. Got some updates for those who don't know. Bob Bassani, who kind of stepped into a part-time role with Economic Development Corporation, has stepped down from that role. So there'll be a transition there. And then I did want to share that as of yesterday, the new Visit Dunn County website is live. So you can share this. There are things to do. It has information about places to go in Dunn County. There's still a lot of Menominee centric because Menominee is larger, but you can see there's like a map of dining in Dunn County. It has listings and images for all of the different businesses. When people see things that they viewed, they can go right there. They can click on something and get a map to it, and has just a little bit of information to it. They can actually go to it and get directions to each of it. It's by no means is it comprehensive at this point. However, it has enough that it can be launched, and that'll be one of the upcoming press releases that the county will put out will be about the site. So people that are not featured in it will hopefully contact us to say, put us in here. So that's live, share it. And that's my report.
Thank you, Supervisor Zahn. Supervisor Quinn.
Thank you. Been pretty much business as usual at PR&D, but we did come up with a strategy and a plan for moving forward on the what do you call them, accessible housing units or accessory dwellings, yeah. Which we've been on the agenda for a while, so we're gonna move forward on that. Moving forward on the comprehensive plan update, which we had contracted with Cedar Court to do, but our staff feels like we can take it in-house and complete it. So we're looking forward to that. And I guess that's a kind of other than the regular zoning stuff and whatever, that's kind of it. So
Thank you, Supervisor Quinn. Supervisor Headland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We last met August 24th. Again, we did our monthly work of reviewing vouchers. We also got, as usual, written staff reports. And those all came from Human Resources, Criminal Justice, Collaboration Division, Treasurer, IT, County Clerk, and so forth. And then we're given their budget information, and after discussion, decided to accept all their budget proposals, which included Chris's amended proposal for helping assist her. We also moved forward and accepted the budget adjustments, which now you've already taken care of. Our next meeting date, we're gonna have a special meeting 1 hour prior to the board meeting, and we're gonna review the audit report so we can decide whether to pass it on to you or not. And then our standard board meeting, committee meeting will be the end of the month, September 28th, on a Thursday here in this room. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Headland. Supervisor Brocknow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Highway, we just got done with paving County Road D north of Packard Drive. The road's 100% better than it was. You don't lose all your teeth going up that road anymore. We got County Road Z and County Road Q and W projects are getting ready to get paved. They'll start that here in the next week. We're still running into some issues with the railroad track on the 1220 or the Highway B going from north of the interstate there. Hopefully get those things set out. They will be going out for bid here, hopefully in the next couple months. We are mowing the ditches again. We sprayed them earlier this year and we are now mowing. Obviously, if anybody's been around, the grasses are getting kind of tall. Talking about not spraying and going back to just mowing instead of the spray. That's about it.
Thank you, Supervisor Prochnow. Supervisor Vogel.
So the facilities committee met August 23rd. And we had a great recap of the fair from the fair board. And we also had our regular department reports, and then we brought that ordinance forward. And our next meeting is September 27th.
Thank you, Supervisor Vogel, and thank you everyone for your attention and care at what has been a very long and dense meeting.
Can I
our-
have 30 seconds?
Absolutely.
All right. So I just wanted to say as well, thank you for your attentiveness for a very, very long meeting. It is not my secret goal to torture you nor your buttocks to death. But I do, so let me use a little analogy. So my mom grew up in a household where her parents divorced when she was very young, and she swore she was never going to get divorced. She was going to work her butt off to not be divorced, and she honored that till my dad passed away. I sat through countless of these executive committee and county board meetings, believing that you guys made decisions on way too little information. And I'd rather you had way more information than you needed than too little. But we'll try to find a balance as we go forward, but it almost feels like there's been sort of a dearth of information and we have to make it up in order to kind of get you on some level ground to be able to make, good choices and decisions for the county. So thank you for your patience.
Well, and I think on that note, we have several new chairs and we've had a very high turnover of the county board over the last couple of years, and we absolutely need the education. We need that component, and I commend you for your efforts on our behalf there. And with that, next meeting, October 11th, 3:30. Hopefully it will be much shorter than this one, but we'll see. And we are adjourned.